The sky above Metropolis burned, not with fire, but with lightning. That had no storm to birth. It, arcs of white gold energy that carved through reality, itself like cracks spreading across frozen glass. The air tasted of ozone and something else, something that made every magician and mystic within 500 miles turn their heads toward the impossible. The Bifrost had reached across dimensional boundaries before, but never like this. Never intersecting with the boom tube. Corridors that Apocalypse used to scar the universe with its presence. When divine Asgardian magic collided with new god technology, the barriers between worlds didn't just bend, they shattered. Thor Odinson fell through the rupture between universes, with Mjolnir clutched in his fist and the echoes of battle still ringing in his ears. He'd been fighting the remnants of Melkitha's forces across the 9 realms when the Bifrost had lurched sideways, caught in an energy signature that tasted of sulfur and conquest. The Rainbow Bridge had screamed, actually screamed, and then he was tumbling through a corridor of impossible geometries while something vast and malevolent watched from the other side of the tunnel. Then gravity remembered its claim on gods, and the Prince of Asgard slammed into the pavement of Fifth Avenue hard enough to crack concrete in a 20-foot radius. The impact crater smoked. Citizens of Metropolis used to Superman's battles, but still appropriately cautious, backed away from the blonde figure rising from the shattered street. Thor stood slowly, his red cape settling around armor that gleamed despite the dimensional transit. He lifted Mjolnir, and lightning answered his call immediately, crackling between his fingers, like eager hounds recognizing their master's voice. The hammer hummed with power, its enchantments intact despite the journey between realities. Good. He was whole. He was armed. And he had absolutely no idea where he was. Surrender or face the wrath of the Metropolis Special Crimes Unit. The voice came from armored officers behind energy barriers, their weapons trained on him with the nervous precision of men who'd seen Superman bleed. Thor turned, taking in the city for the first time. Towers of glass and steel reached toward a yellow sun that felt wrong, too warm, too energizing in a way that made his skin tingle. The architecture spoke of hope and tomorrow, so unlike Gotham's gothic shadows or New York's cynical grandeur. This was a city built by people who believed in heroes. Then something moved faster than Thor's Asgardian reflexes could fully track. A blur of red and blue, and suddenly a figure floated before him at eye level, cape billowing, in winds that existed only around him. The symbol on his chest catching the sunlight like a promise. The man wore blue and red, an S emblazoned across his chest and his eyes. By Odin's beard, his eyes held the weight of worlds. Not the cunning of Loki or the fury of the Hulk, but something else. Hope, wearing the face of absolute power. Easy, the man said, his voice carrying the kind of calm that came from knowing he could stop a planetary invasion before breakfast. I don't know who you are or how you got here, but that entrance registered on about 15 different threat detection systems. I'm going to need you to lower the hammer and explain yourself before this gets complicated. Thor studied the floating man, warrior instincts cataloging details faster than conscious thought. Kryptonian physiology, he could hear the different resonance in the heartbeat. See the way the yellow sun's energy danced beneath skin that should be vulnerable but wasn't. Powerful. Immensely so. The kind of power that could crack moons if unleashed without restraint. Yet there was something in the stance, the careful way he positioned himself between Thor and the civilians, that spoke of iron self-control. I am Thor, son of Odin, Prince of Asgard and protector of the 9 realms, he announced. Because when one was a god, introductions mattered. I mean thy people no harm. I was traversing the Bifrost when something intersected my path, a doorway that tasted of conquest and darkness. He lowered Mjolnir slightly but didn't release his grip. I know not what world this is, but I would have words with whoever rules this realm. The man in blue and red's expression shifted, surprise, flickering across features that had probably stopped showing genuine emotion in public years ago. Asgard, he repeated slowly. The Bifrost. You're saying you're a god. His eyes narrowed, scanning Thor with vision that probably saw far more than visible light. Your cellular structure is. I've never seen anything like it. Not Kryptonian, not new god, not any alien species in the database. Because I am not of thy universe, Thor said, understanding crystallizing like ice. The rift. It wasn't just space, it was reality itself. He looked up at the sky where the dimensional tear had already begun to seal, leaving only the faintest shimmer like heat haze. What is this place? Earth, Superman said, floating down to stand at Thor's level. A gesture of diplomacy that didn't escape the Asgardian's notice. Metropolis, specifically. And I'm Superman. He extended a hand, and Thor clasped it without hesitation. The grip was careful, tested, two beings of immense strength measuring each other in the oldest way warriors knew. If you really are from another universe, we need to talk. The Justice League will want to meet you. Justice League. Thor's grip on Mjolnir relaxed further. Warriors of this realm? Heroes, Superman corrected. And something in his tone suggested the distinction mattered deeply. We protect Earth and, when necessary, beyond. But dimensional incursions. He glanced back at the rift's fading signature. Those usually mean trouble. Big trouble. Thunder rumbled overhead despite the clear sky. Mjolnir responding to Thor's instinctive unease. If what he'd felt in that corridor was native to this universe, then Superman's concern was justified. That presence had been vast, malevolent, and very, very interested in the Asgardian. Power that had just been dragged across dimensional boundaries, like bait across a predator's den. Then let us speak with thy league, Thor declared, because allies were the first thing any warrior secured in unfamiliar territory. And mayhaps they can explain why thine sun feels like it could set the very air, aflame with power. Superman's expression shifted into something that might have been a smile if it wasn't so carefully controlled. Yeah, he said quietly. We should probably talk about that too. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. Hope shines brightest in the darkest night. The dimensional rift sealed, completely with a sound like reality, remembering how to breathe. But in the space between universes, something ancient and terrible had taken notice of the Asgardian prince who'd stumbled into a cosmos where gods walked among men and the line between savior and tyrant was measured in choices, not power. Darkseid, Lord of Apocalypse, smiled in the depths of his fortress and reached for a mother box. An Asgardian god. In his universe, the anti-life equation had just become far more interesting. The watchtower hung in geosynchronous orbit above Earth like a crystal fortress of purpose. Its architecture speaking of both defense and hope, a balance that seemed uniquely important to this universe's heroes. Thor stood in the teleportation bay, still adjusting to technology that felt fundamentally different from Asgardian or even Stark's creations. The beam that had transported him from Metropolis hadn't felt like the Bifrost's rainbow, bridge, or even sorcery. It was something else entirely. A marriage of physics and intent that made Mjolnir hum with curiosity against his palm. Superman led him through corridors where the walls themselves seemed to breathe with ambient light, past windows that framed Earth below in all its blue-green glory. Thor had seen countless worlds from the heavens, Asgard's golden spires, Vanaheim's forests, even Midgard from the rainbow bridge, but there was something about this Earth that felt both familiar and alien. The continents were right, the oceans placed correctly, yet the energy signature was wrong. Too much magic bleeding through the atmosphere. Too many scars in reality where something called the Speed Force had torn holes in causality itself. They entered a chamber that could only be a war room. The long table dominated the space, surrounded by chairs that had clearly seen councils where the fate of worlds hung in balance. But it was the three figures waiting that made Thor's warrior instincts sharpened to diamond focus. Superman took his place at the table's head, but the other two commanded attention in entirely different ways. The woman stood like she'd been carved from the concept of war itself. Tall, regal, armor that spoke of ancient battlefields and divine craftsmanship. Her dark hair framed features that were beautiful, in the way storm fronts were beautiful. And when her eyes met Thor's, he recognized something fundamental. Warrior, Amazon, goddess-born. If his senses read true, she assessed him the way Sif might have. calculating threat and worth in a single sweeping glance. The man in the shadows was different. He didn't stand so much as inhabit the darkness between light sources, his cowl making a skull's mask of his face, cape spreading like bat wings across his shoulders. No divine blood here. No alien heritage, just human determination wrapped in armor and absolute conviction. Yet the way Superman and the warrior woman deferred to his presence, the microscopic shift in their postures when he moved, told Thor everything he needed to know about power that had nothing to do with strength. Thor of Asgard. The woman spoke first, her voice carrying the accent of ancient Greece filtered through millennia of warriors' purpose. I am Diana, princess of Themyscira. Some call me Wonder Woman. She didn't offer her hand, but inclined her head. Warriors respect, nothing more. Superman tells us you fell through a dimensional rift, that you claim to be a god from another universe entirely. I make no claims, lady. Thor replied, meeting her gaze without flinching. I am son of Odin Allfather, brother to Loki the trickster, protector of Midgard and the 9 realms beyond. I have walked beneath Asgard's golden halls and fought monsters that would make mortals weep. If thou art truly Amazon-born, then thou knowest the mark of divinity when it stands before thee. Diana's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but acknowledgement. I know the Olympians, she said carefully. My mother was sculpted from clay and given life by Zeus himself. I have stood before Ares and Hades, fought alongside Athena, and been blessed by Aphrodite. Your energy signature is different. Not Greek, not even pantheon magic I recognize, but divine nonetheless. Batman. Superman's voice cut through the tension, and Thor turned his attention to the cowled figure who'd been studying him in absolute silence. Cellular analysis confirms non-terrestrial origin, the man called Batman said, his voice like gravel scraping across intent, but also non-standard for any cataloged alien species. The hammer reads as enchanted, actual magic, not Clark's Law sufficiently advanced technology. He's telling the truth about being from another universe. Or he's the most elaborate deception I've encountered. A pause that felt weighted with unspoken contingency plans, which given our history with crisis events and dark multiverse incursions, isn't impossible. Thor's hand tightened on Mjolnir. Dark multiverse. Nightmare realities, Diana explained, her warrior's directness cutting through diplomatic hesitation. Universes where heroes failed, where darkness won. They bleed into our realities sometimes, bringing monsters that wear familiar faces, twisted into horror. Her eyes never left his. We've learned to be cautious with dimensional travelers, Thor Odinson. Some arrive as friends, others as invasions wearing friendly faces. The accusation hung in the air like an unsheathed blade. Thor understood it. By Odin's wisdom, he respected it. These were warriors who'd been burned before. Heroes who'd learned that trust without verification was how worlds fell. Asgard had learned similar lessons over millennia of dealing with frost giants and dark elves who'd masqueraded as allies. Then test me, Thor declared, spreading his arms wide and releasing his grip on Mjolnir. The hammer hovered beside him, maintained by his worthiness rather than physical contact. I have naught to hide from honorable warriors. Probe my mind, analyze my blood. Speak whatever truth compelling. Magic's thy princess possesses. He looked at Diana specifically. Thou hast the lasso of truth, I saw its gleam upon thy hip. I will submit to its judgment willingly. Batman's cowl shifted, surprise, perhaps, though the shadows made it impossible to be certain. Superman's expression softened slightly, some tension leaving his shoulders. But it was Diana who moved, drawing the golden rope from her belt with practiced ease. The lasso glowed with its own internal light, warm and compelling, radiating an aura that made even Thor's divine nature want to speak truth. You would submit to this? Diana asked, genuine curiosity coloring her tone. Most beings resist the lasso, even heroes. It compels absolute honesty, strips away all deception, even comfortable lies we tell ourselves. I am Thor, son of Odin, he said simply. I do not fear truth. It is the bedrock upon which Asgard stands. Diana's respect visibly deepened. She stepped forward and with surprising gentleness looped the lasso around Thor's armored wrist. The effect was immediate, warmth spreading through his veins like honey wine. A compulsion that wasn't hostile, but simply made lying as impossible as unringing a bell. He'd faced Loki's silver tongue for centuries, resisted magical compulsions from sorcerers across the 9 realms. But this was different. This didn't force or coerce. It simply made truth the only option that existed. State your name and origin, Diana commanded, her voice taking on a formal quality that suggested ritual. I am Thor Odinson, Prince of Asgard, son of Odin All-Father and Gaia, the elder goddess. The words came without conscious effort, pulled from him like water from a well. I was traversing the Bifrost when my path intersected with what I now believe was this universe's boom tube technology. The collision tore me from my reality and deposited me in Metropolis. Positioned through the watchtower's windows, 2 of thy hours passed. Why were you using the Bifrost? Batman's question was sharp, tactical, pursuing the remnants of Malekith, the accursed forces across Svartalfheim. Thor answered, the lasso making strategic omission impossible. The Dark Elf sought to plunge the 9 realms into eternal darkness. I defeated him, but his cultists remained dangerous. I was hunting them when the rift pulled me here. Do you serve any being that would threaten Earth? Superman asked, his tone gentler but no less serious. I serve Asgard and protect Midgard, what you call Earth, in my own universe. Thor said, I would see no harm come to any version of Midgard in any reality. Thy people are under my protection by oath and honor. Diana met Batman's eyes, some unspoken communication passing between them. Then she looked to Superman, who nodded slowly. The lasso's glow pulsed once, confirming what they already suspected. Every word had been absolute truth. Diana unwound the rope from Thor's wrist with the same care she'd shown in binding him. Then welcome to Earth, Thor of Asgard, she said, and this time extended her hand. Thor clasped it, warrior to warrior, and felt the strength in her grip, genuine divine power. Different from Asgardian heritage, but no less real. Though I suspect your arrival wasn't merely accident. Dimensional rifts of that magnitude don't occur naturally. She's right, Batman said, finally stepping forward into the light. Without the shadows, Thor could see the human underneath, strong jaw, eyes that had seen too much darkness and refused to look away. I've been analyzing the energy signature from your arrival. The boom tube component wasn't random. Something on the apocalypse, and deliberately intersected with your Bifrost transit. Thor's expression darkened. Apocalypse. That is the name of the presence I felt in the corridor. Vast, malevolent, hungry. Darkseid, Superman said quietly, and the name carried weight like speaking cancer into existence. Lord of Apocalypse, seeker of the anti-life equation. If he's aware of your arrival, then he'll want either to recruit you or eliminate you as a threat. Let him try, Thor said, lightning crackling between his fingers instinctively. I have faced down Surtur the fire giant and stood against the serpent himself. I do not fear tyrants who hide in the darkness. You should, Diana said, and her warrior's honesty cut deeper than any warning. Darkseid isn't like villains you've faced. Thor, he's a god of tyranny itself. New god technology married to cosmic malevolence. He's fought Superman to stand still, faced the entire Justice League, and walked away. And he's patient. He'll study you, learn your weaknesses, and strike when you're most vulnerable. Batman's cowl turned toward the window, towards space beyond. The question is why he's interested at all. Your power is formidable, but we have multiple beings of similar capability on Earth. What makes an Asgardian specifically valuable to someone seeking the anti-life equation? Thor looked down at Mjolnir, the hammer responding to his attention with a pulse of warm lightning. The enchantments, he said slowly. My father placed them upon Mjolnir. Whosoever holds this hammer, if he be worthy, shall possess the power of Thor. It's not simply magic, it's a judgment, a cosmic assessment of worth and character. The 3 Justice League founders exchanged glances that spoke volumes. Superman's expression showed understanding dawning like sunrise. Diana's warrior features settled into grim determination. Batman's cowl tilted in the particular way that meant contingencies were being calculated at processor speed. A judgment that determines worthiness, Batman said flatly. An equation that could theoretically assess any being's moral core. Darkseid wouldn't want to destroy that. He'd want to reverse engineer it, corrupt it, turn judgment into subjugation. Thor's fist clenched around Mjolnir's shaft, thunder rumbling through the watchtower's walls despite the vacuum of space beyond. Then he chose poorly when he dragged me into thy universe, Dark Knight. For I am the god of thunder, and I do not kneel to tyrants. Superman floated slightly, settling into a stance that suggested decisions being made. Then we protect you while we figure out how to send you home. The Justice League has dealt with dimensional travelers before. We have resources, magic users, technology that might be able to. Incoming, Batman interrupted, his gauntlet hand moving to his cowl's interface. Boom tube signature. Multiple contacts. Apocalypse origin. His head snapped toward Thor. They're already here. Diana's sword materialized in her hand as if summoned by will alone, its edge catching the light with divine sharpness. Superman's eyes began to glow with restrained heat vision, and Thor felt Mjolnir surge with eager lightning, the hammer practically singing with anticipation of battle. Good, Thor said, moving toward the window where Earth hung like a jewel against the void. I would have words with this Darkseid, and those words shall be written in lightning across the sky. The boom tubes erupted across Earth's orbit like infected wounds in space-time, their distinctive sound, a mechanical scream that spoke of conquered worlds and burning skies, making even the watchtower's reinforced hull vibrate with sympathetic resonance. Through the viewport, Thor watched as geometric portals vomited forth creatures that defied his expectation of organized military deployment. These weren't soldiers. They were locusts given armor and malice. Parademons. Hundreds of them, their wings beating against vacuum as if physics was merely a suggestion they'd chosen to ignore. Gray-skinned, cybernetically enhanced, faces twisted into permanent screams of whatever torment had transformed them from living beings into living weapons. They swarmed toward the watchtower like hornets. And behind them, larger shapes moved with more purpose. Battle stations, Batman's voice carried. Through the watchtower's intercom. With the calm of someone who'd drilled for exactly this scenario 1,000 times. This is not a drill. Apocalypse forces inbound. Full League response authorized. The war room transformed. Panels slid back to reveal weapons systems that would make even Stark jealous. Energy cannons, missile batteries, defensive shields that hummed to life with the kind of power that could probably crack a small moon. But more impressive than the technology was the response. Within 30 seconds, the room filled with heroes. A blur of red and yellow lightning resolved into a man wearing a red suit with a golden bolt across his chest, his entire body vibrating slightly as if he existed in multiple moments simultaneously. I was in Central City, he said, words tumbling out with barely controlled speed. Got here in 0.87 seconds. What's the— Oh man, parademons. I hate parademons. Flash, Superman acknowledged. Thor, this is Barry Allen. Fastest man alive. Thor nodded to the speedster, whose energy signature made his Asgardian senses dizzy. The man wasn't just fast, he was connected to something vast. A force that turned time itself into a suggestion. Green light blazed as another figure materialized from thin air. Power ring construct forming him from pure willpower. The man wore a green and black uniform, and the ring on his finger radiated the kind of cosmic authority Thor recognized from the Odin Force itself. Hal Jordan, Green Lantern, he announced, his ring already forming a massive cannon construct, pointed at the approaching horde. Someone want to tell me why Darkseid's knocking on our door? The Asgardian, Batman said flatly, gesturing to Thor. Dimensional traveler. Darkseid noticed. Of course he did. A new voice rumbled, and Thor turned to see a figure who read as half human, half machine. The man, cyborg, his armor's database identified, was integrated with technology that felt eerily similar to the boom tube energy still crackling outside. My sensors are going crazy. That dimensional breach earlier registered on every mother box adjacent system on the planet. If I noticed, Darkseid definitely noticed. The last arrival came not through technology, but through solid matter, phasing through the watchtower's wall like it wasn't there. Green skin, red eyes. A cape that somehow made the alien features seem regal rather than monstrous. The Martian's telepathic presence washed over Thor like a gentle tide. Curious, but respectful, asking permission before probing deeper. John Johns, the Martian said aloud, his voice carrying the weight of loneliness that comes from being the last of anything. Martian Manhunter, your mind is structured differently. Divine architecture I've never encountered. Asgardian, Thor confirmed, and grateful for thy courtesy in not breaching my thoughts uninvited. I have dealt with telepaths less honorable. Later, Diana interrupted, her sword already reflecting the light of incoming Omega beams. They're in weapons range. The battle began with the casual apocalyptic violence that apparently passed for Tuesday in this universe. The Watchtower's defense grid opened fire, energy lances spearing through vacuum to immolate parademons by the dozen. But for every one that fell, 3 more poured through the boom tubes. Superman launched himself through the airlock, cape streaming behind him as he became a missile of Kryptonian fury, heat vision carving burning lines through the demonic horde. Diana followed a heartbeat later, her warrior's cry audible even through vacuum, some magic, allowing sound to carry, or perhaps just the universe itself making exception for Amazon battle fury. She became a whirlwind of sword and shield and divine wrath, each strike ending a parademon's shrieking existence. Okay, Flash said, his hand on Thor's shoulder suddenly, having crossed the room faster than perception. Quick primer on fighting parademons. They're strong, they're fast. They explode when killed, and there's always more of them. The trick is, Thor wasn't listening. Mjolnir sang in his hand, literally sang, a harmonic that resonated through his bones with the eager anticipation of a wolf scenting prey. He'd been pulled from his universe, studied like a specimen, and now attacked by creatures serving a tyrant who thought gods were resources to be exploited. The thunder in his veins wasn't just power, it was indignation, divine and absolute. The trick, Thor said, lightning beginning to arc across his armor, spreading to the walls and floor until the entire chamber blazed with electric fury, is to remind them that they faced the god of thunder. He didn't ask permission, didn't wait for strategy or coordination. Thor simply raised Mjolnir skyward and called the storm. What answered wasn't the localized lightning he used against street-level threats in New York. This was the full fury of Asgardian storm calling, power that had shattered frost giant armies and brought rain to dying worlds. Lightning erupted from Mjolnir in a column of white-gold devastation, punching through the watchtowers. Designated combat portal with such force that the station's shields flickered. The bolt hit space, and space remembered what it meant to carry thunder. The effect was devastating. Lightning arced between parademons like a living thing, jumping from target to target in branching patterns of annihilation. Their cybernetic enhancements, designed to resist energy weapons, became conductors for divine wrath. Dozens died in the first second, hundreds in the next 3. The vacuum itself seemed to carry the thunder, reality bending to accommodate a god's rage. Holy, Flash's sentence ended in awed silence. New player, Hal Jordan said, his reconstruct canon forgotten as he watched the light show. I like the new player. But Thor wasn't done. He spun Mjolnir by its leather strap, building momentum that had nothing to do with physics and everything to do with worthiness manifesting as kinetic energy. When he released the hammer, it flew through the combat portal like a meteor with divine purpose, trailing lightning in the echo of ancient storms. Parademons tried to scatter, but Mjolnir didn't chase, it herded, driving the swarm into a tighter and tighter formation. Then the hammer stopped, hovering in the center of the mass, and detonated every ounce of accumulated storm energy in a single spherical blast. The silence that followed was absolute. Where hundreds of parademons had been, there was now only debris and the fading crackle of dissipating electricity. Thor extended his hand, and Mjolnir returned with the loyalty of a faithful hound, settling into his palm as if it had never left. Okay, Batman said into the stunned quiet. He can stay. Superman floated back through the airlock, Diana beside him, both warriors showing the kind of respect that came from recognizing true power. That was. Superman searched for words, comprehensive. Efficient, Diana corrected, sheathing her sword with a warrior's economy. Thor of Asgard, you fight well. I am Asgardian, Thor said simply, as if that explained everything. And perhaps it did. We do not compromise in battle. Not when darkness threatens innocence. Those weren't the main force, Cyborg interrupted. His technological eye focused on something beyond normal perception. Parademons are cannon fodder. Darkseid wouldn't send just them, especially not against the Justice League. His metal fingers flew across holographic interfaces. I'm picking up another boom tube signature. Bigger. Single entity. The portal that opened was different from the others, more refined, controlled. The shriek of tortured space-time, replaced with something that sounded almost musical. If music could embody tyranny, the figure that stepped through made Thor's warrior instincts scream warnings older than Asgard itself. She was beautiful in the way avalanches were beautiful, inevitable, deadly, perfect in her terrible purpose. Red armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Black hair that moved with its own malevolent life. Eyes that held the cold assessment of someone who'd broken stronger beings than Thor before breakfast. She stood in the vacuum of space as casually as one might stand in a meadow. And when she spoke, her voice carried across the void with the authority of absolute conviction. Asgardian, Granny Goodness said, her smile like a knife in velvet. Darkseid sends his regards and an invitation. Come willingly to Apocalypse. Submit to the will of the new gods, and your death will be swift. Resist. Her smile widened, showing teeth that seemed slightly too sharp. And I shall educate you in suffering until you beg to serve. Thor's response was to hurl Mjolnir with enough force to crack planets. Granny Goodness didn't dodge. She raised one armored hand, and the hammer stopped mid-flight, caught in a stasis field that made the air shimmer with new god technology. Her expression shifted from amusement to genuine surprise as Mjolnir struggled against the containment, lightning crackling around the field's boundaries like a caged beast. Interesting, she said, studying the hammer with the focus of a weapons master recognizing quality. Craftsmanship. Enchantments I've never encountered. Magic that resists motherbox nullification. Darkseid will be pleased with this acquisition. Acquisition? Thor's voice carried across the void, powered by indignation and building fury. Lightning began to arc from his body directly, no longer needing Mjolnir as a focus. The Odin force flickered beneath his skin, responding to his rage. I am Thor Odinson, Prince of Asgard, and I am no one's possession. He thrust both hands forward, and lightning erupted from his palms, raw, uncontrolled. The kind of power that made even Superman take a step back. The bolt hit Granny Goodness's stasis field and didn't stop, didn't disperse. It punched through new god technology with Asgardian fury, forcing the field to collapse and freeing Mjolnir in an explosion of divine feedback. Granny Goodness staggered, actually staggered, smoke rising from her armor where the lightning had scored the metal. Her expression shifted from amusement to something colder. Respect, perhaps, or the acknowledgement that prey had teeth. The hard way, then, she said, and vanished back through her boom tube, the portal collapsing behind her with finality. Mjolnir returned to Thor's hand, and he stood there in the aftermath, chest heaving with battle fury not fully expressed, lightning still dancing across his armor. The Justice League surrounded him, their expressions ranging from impressed to concerned to, in Batman's case, carefully calculating. That, Flash said into the silence, was the coolest thing I've ever seen. And I've seen Superman punch a moon. She'll be back, Diana said, her warrior's intuition reading the tactical situation clearly. And she won't come alone next time. Granny Goodness is one of Darkseid's most dangerous servants. If he's sending her personally, he wants you badly. Let him want, Thor declared. I have faced Laufey, king of the frost giants. I have battled Surtur at the gates of Muspelheim. I have stood against the serpent himself when he sought to devour Midgard. This Darkseid is but another tyrant who believes power grants him dominion over the worthy. Batman's cowl turned toward him, and Thor could feel the weight of that analytical gaze. Confidence is good, the Dark Knight said. Carefully. Overconfidence against Darkseid is suicide. He's destroyed civilizations, conquered worlds, and he's been trying to obtain the anti-life equation for millennia. If he thinks your hammer's enchantments could help him achieve that goal, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Then we make sure that never happens, Superman said firmly, floating closer to Thor. You're under Justice League protection now, whether you want it or not. We don't abandon people to apocalypse. Thor met Superman's eyes and saw something that reminded him of his own. reflection in calmer moments, the burden of power wielded with purpose, strength married to compassion. In another life, under different skies, they might have been brothers in arms. Perhaps in this life, they still could be. I accept thy protection, man of steel, Thor said formally, and offer mine own in return. For as long as I remain in thy universe, Asgard stands with the Justice League. John's telepathic voice touched all their minds simultaneously. Gentle but urgent, then we should prepare. Because Darkseid doesn't accept failure. He'll come himself next time. And when he does, even gods will need allies. Through the viewport, Earth rotated in serene indifference, unaware that in orbit above, a god from another universe had just made himself the target of the greatest tyrant in cosmic history. Somewhere in the depths of Apocalypse, Darkseid sat upon his throne and smiled. The Asgardian had power, yes, but power was merely a tool, and every tool could be broken, studied, and repurposed. The game had begun. The Hall of Justice stood in Washington, D.C. like a monument to humanity's aspirations made manifest, white marble columns reaching skyward, architecture that married classical Greek temples with hopeful tomorrow thinking, the twin statues of Superman and Wonder Woman flanking the entrance like gods guarding Olympus. Thor descended from the javelin, 7. Transport with the kind of careful dignity that came from representing Asgard in a foreign court, even if that court was simply another version of Midgard. This is thy Hall of Heroes, Thor asked, studying the building with an architect's eye. It speaks of permanence, of values carved in stone rather than written in sand. It's more museum and public face than actual headquarters, Diana explained as they walked toward the entrance. The crowds of tourists and civilians parted like water around her, recognition and awe creating a bubble of space. The watchtower handles active operations. This is where we interface with world governments, hold press conferences, remind people that heroes answer to ideals rather than politics. Though the politics still happen, Flash added, vibrating slightly with barely contained energy. So much paperwork. You wouldn't think saving the world would involve so much paperwork. Batman had remained at the watchtower, citing 23 different security protocols that needed updating. In light of Apocalypse's direct assault, Thor suspected the Dark Knight simply preferred shadows to spotlights. He could respect that. Loki had always flourished in attention while Thor found his truest self in battle's clarity rather than court's performance. The interior of the hall proved even more impressive than the exterior. The main rotunda soared 3 stories high, its domed ceiling painted with a mural depicting the Justice League's greatest victories. Superman breaking Brainiac's world engine, Wonder Woman's sword raised against Ares, the Flash outrunning the Black Racer himself, Green Lantern's willpower construct holding together a fragmenting planet. Heroes as mythology, battles as legend. Asgard would approve. But it was the trophy room that made Thor stop walking entirely, behind reinforced glass and energy barriers that made his divine senses itch with suppressed power sat, artifacts that would make the collector weep with envy, a yellow ring pulsing with barely contained fear energy, Brainiac's broken computronium skull still trying to calculate its own defeat, a fragment of red crystal that made Thor's skin tingle, kryptonite. Superman had called it the Kryptonian's vulnerability made physical. And in the center, rotating slowly on a pedestal of pure light, a small gray cube that hummed with the kind of power that transcended mere physics. Motherbox, Cyborg said, appearing beside Thor with the unsettling silence of someone who was part machine. Inactive. We captured it during the Darkseid War 3 years ago. It's been trying to phone home ever since, but our containment holds. Thor studied the cube, Mjolnir growing warm in his hand as if recognizing kinship with another form of advanced technology married to something beyond pure science. This is what intersected with the Bifrost, the energy signature matches. Mother boxes are sentient computers created by new gods, Cyborg explained. His human eye focused on the artifact while his technological components ran constant diagnostics. They can manipulate energy, matter, generate boom tubes, heal injuries, evolve technology. Basically, they're the ultimate Swiss Army knife if that knife could rewrite physics. He tapped his chest where metal met flesh. Part of me is motherbox technology. It's how I interface with the boom tube network. Why I could feel your arrival before anyone else. And Darkseid creates these? Thor asked, troubled. In his experience, tyrants who gifted sentient tools to their servants were either foolish or playing games so complex that the tools themselves were merely pieces on a board beyond mortal comprehension. The new gods of New Genesis created them, Diana corrected, joining them at the display. Darkseid's corrupted versions are called father boxes, twisted mirrors of the original design. But yes, the technology is new god origin, which means it's beyond most of what even we can fully understand. I would examine it more closely, Thor said. Not a request, but not quite a demand either. If this mother box technology pulled me into thy universe, perhaps it holds the key to my return home. Cyborg and Diana exchanged glances that spoke of classified information and security protocols. Then Diana nodded, making an executive decision. That would probably result in a very pointed conversation with Batman later. Victor, lower the inner barrier. Thor, you can approach, but don't touch directly. If the mother box activates, it won't, Cyborg interrupted, but his confidence seemed forced. It's been dormant for 3 years. No reason that should change now. The energy barrier dissolved with a sound like crystal wind chimes. Thor stepped forward, Mjolnir held loosely but ready. Every Asgardian sense tuned to the artifact before him. Up close, the mother box was smaller than he'd expected, barely the size of his palm. Gray metal inscribed, with circuits that weren't quite technology, and symbols that weren't quite language. It pulsed with a heartbeat rhythm, alive in ways that made his skin prickle with recognition. Then it pinged. The sound was soft, almost musical, a query rather than alarm. Cyborg's technological eye widened, displays cascading across his vision. That's impossible. It hasn't made a sound since we contained it. The mother box pinged again, louder this time, insistent. The symbols on its surface began to glow with inner light, and Thor felt something reach out toward Mjolnir, not hostile, but curious, questioning. The hammer responded with its own pulse of energy, and suddenly Thor understood what was happening. They're communicating, he said, wonder coloring his voice. The mother box and Mjolnir. They recognize each other as kin? No, that's not quite right. As equals. Both sentient tools created by divine hands for worthy wielders. That's not in any of our research, Diana said, her hand moving instinctively to her sword hilt. Mother boxes bond with users, but they don't communicate with enchanted weapons. The mother box pinged a third time, and this time Thor heard something in the sound, loneliness. This wasn't a tool trying to phone home to apocalypse. This was a prisoner reaching out to the first being in years who could understand what it meant to be intelligence bound to purpose, power yoked to worthiness judgment. Thy universe imprisoned it, Thor said quietly, understanding crystallizing. But it is New Genesis born, not apocalypse corrupted. It sought escape from Darkseid's servants, and ye mistook its flight for threat. We couldn't risk, Cyborg started, but Thor raised a hand. I do not judge thy caution, friend Cyborg. I merely observe that this mother box is not thy enemy. He looked at the artifact directly, speaking as if it could understand, which, given what Cyborg had said about sentience, it probably could. I am Thor of Asgard. I come from beyond thy reality. Canst thou sense this? Dost thou understand that I am lost as thou art imprisoned? The mother box's glow intensified, cycling through colors that shouldn't exist, blue, gold, silver, something that Thor's eyes couldn't quite process. Then it projected a hologram, and everyone in the room tensed. The image showed the Bifrost rainbow bridge stretching across infinite void. Then the image shifted, showing a boom tube opening in the same space. The two energies colliding like matter meeting antimatter. The hologram replayed the moment Thor's transit had been intercepted, showed with mathematical precision how the mother box had been present in that boom tube corridor, but not by choice. It had been forced there, used as bait by something vast and malevolent that had calculated exactly what kind of energy signature would attract Asgardian attention. Darkseid, Diana breathed. He planned this. Used one of New Genesis's own mother boxes as a trap to drag you here. But why? Flash had appeared beside them, his speedster metabolism making standing still nearly painful. I mean, no offense, Thor, but you're powerful and all. But Darkseid's fought Superman multiple times. Why specifically one an Asgardian? The mother box's hologram shifted again, and this time it showed Mjolnir. Not as it appeared physically, but as it existed metaphysically, a web of enchantments and cosmic judgments. Oaths sworn by Odin All-Father binding worthiness to power. The image zoomed deeper, showing the fundamental architecture of the spell. And Thor's breath caught. By the Norns, he whispered. It's not just enchantment. It's a form of equation. Cosmic mathematics determining worth. Anti-life equation, Cyborg said. His human voice, overlaid with digital horror as his. Mother box components translated. What they were seeing. Darkseid seeks the anti-life equation, a mathematical proof that free will is meaningless, that all beings are fundamentally worthless and should submit to his control. Your hammer's enchantments are the inverse, a proof that worthiness exists, that some beings deserve power, that value can be measured and found true. He wants to corrupt it, Diana said, her warrior's mind seeing the tactical nightmare immediately. Turn Mjolnir's judgment from worthiness test to unworthiness proof. If he could reverse engineer Odin's enchantment, invert its logic, he would have the anti-life equation. Thor finished, his knuckles white around Mjolnir's shaft. Rage built in his chest, hot and terrible. He would use my father's greatest gift, twist it into a weapon that proves all life meaningless. Lightning began to crackle across his armor, spreading to the floor. He would turn hope itself into chains. The mother box pinged urgently, its hologram shifting to show Apocalypse, the burning planet, the fire pits, the Omega symbols carved into reality itself. Then it showed Darkseid's throne room. And sitting there, the Lord of Apocalypse himself. The image was too detailed to be mere approximation. This mother box had been there, had seen Darkseid up close, had perhaps been studying the tyrant as much as he'd been using it. It wants to help, Thor realized. It knows Darkseid's plans. It can show us how he thinks, how he fights. Or it's a trap, Cyborg said. His paranoia reasonable given they were discussing new god technology. Batman would say we're being fed exactly the information that would make us lower our guard. The mother box pinged again, and this time the sound carried something that transcended mere acoustics, emotion, perhaps, or the closest thing a sentient computer could manage. Frustration, desperation. The hologram shifted one last time, showing New Genesis, the beautiful planet of light and hope. Highfather's realm where new gods walked in peace rather than tyranny. The mother box had been born there, Thor understood, had served benevolent masters before Darkseid's forces captured it, corrupted its fellows, turned father boxes into weapons while this one remained pure through sheer will. It was, in its way, as imprisoned as Thor was lost. I trust it, Thor declared, making the decision with Asgardian certainty. It is a warrior separated from its home, fighting to maintain honor despite capture. I know such struggles. I have seen Loki twist our father's gifts into weapons. I will not abandon another who resists such corruption. Thor, Diana started, but he raised Mjolnir high. I am Prince of Asgard and protector of 9 realms. His voice carried the authority of godhood and absolute conviction. If Darkseid believes he can steal my father's enchantments and twist them into chains, he shall learn why Asgard does not kneel. Lightning erupted from Mjolnir, not attacking but declaring, a challenge written in thunder across dimensions. The mother box's glow intensified to near-blinding brightness, and then it spoke. Not in pings or hologram, but in actual language that bypassed sound entirely to implant meaning directly into their minds. Alliance accepted. Worthiness recognized. Darkseid must fall. Cyborg staggered, his technological components integrating. The mother box's signal against his will. It's uploading data. Apocalypse force compositions. Darkseid's strategic patterns, boom tube coordinates. Father box corruption protocols, new. Genesis sanctuary locations. His human eye widened with something between terror and wonder. It's giving us everything. Every secret it's learned while imprisoned on Apocalypse. Then we have a chance, Diana said, her hand finally leaving her sword hilt. Thor, this mother box may be our best weapon against Darkseid's plans. Not weapon, Thor corrected, looking at the glowing cube with new respect. Ally, there is a difference. The mother box pinged once more, agreement, perhaps, or gratitude. And in that moment, Thor felt something shift in the fabric of this reality. He'd arrived as an accident, a dimensional castaway, but now he was something more dangerous. He was a problem Darkseid couldn't ignore, backed by allies who'd fought tyranny across cosmos and time, armed with intelligence from the heart of enemy territory itself. Somewhere in Apocalypse, Darkseid's smile faded. The equation he'd been calculating had just gained variables he hadn't accounted for. The Asgardian wasn't merely powerful. He was making friends. And friends, in the calculus of cosmic conquest, were the one element that could never be fully predicted or controlled. The game had changed, and gods who'd become comfortable with their winning streak were about to learn what it meant when new players refused to follow the established rules. Themyscira rose from the Aegean, sea like a promise kept, white marble temples gleaming against azure sky, waterfalls cascading down cliffs that had stood since before humanity named the stars. Training grounds where warriors moved through sword forms, with the precision of prayers made physical. Thor stood on the transport ship's deck as the island materialized, through magical barriers that made his Asgardian senses sing with recognition. This was protected space, sacred ground where divine blood and mortal determination had forged, something that transcended either alone. "My mother will want to meet you," Diana said, standing beside him at the rail. She'd changed from her armor into flowing robes that somehow made her more rather than less formidable, a warrior at ease in her homeland, no longer performing strength for a world that might mistake it for threat. An Asgardian god appearing in our reality will interest her greatly. Queen Hippolyta has lived for millennia. She's met Zeus, fought Ares, negotiated with Hades. She'll want to measure you against those encounters. "I welcome such scrutiny," Thor replied, watching as Amazon warriors on the docks noticed their approach and began organizing what looked like formal reception protocols. In Asgard, worth is proven through deed and trial. If thy mother wishes to test me, I shall meet her challenge with honor. "She won't test your strength," Diana corrected, a slight smile playing at her lips. "She'll test your character." Amazons were created to teach mankind about peace, not to serve as warriors, though we learned that particular skill out of necessity. "My mother will want to know if you wield power with wisdom or merely with force." The ship docked with practiced efficiency, and Thor descended the gangplank into a world that felt simultaneously alien and familiar. The architecture spoke of ancient Greece filtered through feminine divine purpose. No, Asgard's golden brutalist grandeur or Olympus's patriarchal excess, but something more balanced. Strength married to grace, power yoked to purpose. Warrior women moved through the streets with casual competence, some in armor, others in scholars' robes. Still others tending gardens and forges with the same focused intensity. "This is remarkable," Thor said quietly, genuine wonder in his voice. In the Nine Realms, warrior cultures oft forget that the sword serves life rather than death serving the sword. Here I see balance. Diana's expression softened with pride. "We've had 3,000 years to perfect it. And even then, we're not without our struggles." She guided him through streets where Amazons paused to bow to their princess before studying. Thor with undisguised curiosity. "Some sisters believe we should remain isolated, that mankind hasn't earned our guidance. Others want to engage more directly with the world of men. It's an eternal debate." They climbed marble steps to a palace that managed to be both fortress and temple, its doors carved with scenes of Amazon victories against monsters and men alike. Inside, the throne room stretched vast and airy, columns supporting a ceiling painted with constellations that actually moved, either magic or technology, so advanced it mimicked it. And seated upon a throne of white marble and gold inlay sat a woman who made Thor understand immediately where Diana had learned to embody divine authority. Queen Hippolyta looked perhaps 40 in mortal years, which meant nothing when discussing immortals. Her hair fell in dark waves threaded with silver that seemed more decoration than age, and her eyes held the weight of millennia spent watching civilizations rise and fall. She wore robes of royal purple, a golden crown that was more circlet than ostentatious display, and when she stood to greet them, Her movement carried the same warrior's grace as her daughter's. Diana, Hippolyta said, her voice warm with maternal affection before cooling into formal assessment. As she turned to Thor, and this must be the Asgardian who has set Apocalypse into motion. Thor bowed, not the casual nod he might give to Midgardian officials, but the full formal bow. Asgard reserved for fellow monarchs. Queen Hippolyta, I am Thor Odinson, Prince of Asgard and son of Odin All-Father. I thank thee for thy hospitality and crave pardon for arriving in thy realm unannounced and bearing complications. Hippolyta's lips curved slightly. Approval of proper courtesy, perhaps. Any enemy of Darkseid is welcome in Themyscira, Prince Thor, though I confess curiosity about how a god from another universe entirely came to our reality. She gestured to seats, arranged in a semicircle. Please sit. Diana has given me the broad details, but I would hear your account directly. They settled into chairs that were somehow more comfortable than they looked. And Thor recounted his story, the Bifrost journey, the boom tube intersection, his arrival in Metropolis and subsequent discovery of Darkseid's interest in Mjolnir's enchantments. Hippolyta listened with the focus of someone who'd spent lifetimes learning to separate truth from comfortable fiction, her gaze occasionally dropping to the hammer resting against Thor's knee. May I? She asked when he'd finished, gesturing toward Mjolnir. Thor hesitated, not from mistrust, but from understanding what she was truly asking. The hammer bears my father's enchantment, your majesty. Only those deemed worthy may lift it. I'm aware, Hippolyta said dryly. Diana mentioned this worthiness test. I'm curious whether Odin's definition of worth aligns with my own understanding. She stood and approached, extending her hand toward the hammer with the confidence of someone who'd commanded the respect of Zeus himself. Thor released his grip on Mjolnir, allowing it to rest against the chair's arm. Hippolyta grasped the leather-wrapped handle and pulled. The hammer didn't move, not even slightly. It might as well have been welded to reality itself. Hippolyta's expression shifted through surprise into thoughtful consideration as she released the handle and stepped back. Interesting. I've commanded armies, ruled justly for 3 millennia, stood against gods and monsters. Yet your father's hammer finds me wanting. The enchantment is specific, Thor said carefully, trying not to sound defensive of Odin's judgment. It measures not just strength or nobility, but I know what it measures, Hippolyta interrupted, but her tone wasn't offended. I felt the enchantment's assessment. It seeks warriors' humility married to absolute conviction, the willingness to bear power's burden without being consumed by it. She returned to her throne, settling with the grace of long practice. Your father's wisdom is different from the Olympians. Zeus would never create a weapon that judged him. Ares would never allow a sword that questioned his worthiness. But Odin, she studied Thor with new intensity. Odin made a weapon that even he must prove worthy to wield. That speaks of either profound wisdom or profound paranoia. Both, in truth, Thor admitted with a slight smile. My father is many things, but simple is not among them. Diana, Hippolyta said, turning to her daughter, you lifted the hammer? Wonder Woman shook her head. I didn't try. I saw what it represented, and chose not to test myself against another pantheon's judgment. Wise, her mother approved. Then back to Thor. This Darkseid seeks to corrupt your hammer's enchantments, to turn worthiness judgment into unworthiness proof. Diana tells me he believes this would grant him the anti-life equation, mathematical proof that all life is meaningless and should submit to his will. Thor confirmed, his hand instinctively finding Mjolnir's shaft again. He dragged me here specifically to steal what my father created, to twist hope into chains. Hippolyta's expression hardened into something that made Thor understand why Ares himself had thought twice before challenging Themyscira. Then we must ensure he fails, not merely because such a weapon would be catastrophic, but because the principle itself is abomination. Amazons exist to teach that life has inherent worth, that humanity can rise above base nature. An equation proving otherwise would be the greatest lie ever forged. Mother, Diana said carefully, the Justice League is already committed to protecting Thor and stopping Darkseid. Why bring him to Themyscira? What can we offer that the watchtower cannot? Context, Hippolyta said simply. She rose from her throne and walked to the balcony, gesturing for them to follow. Below, the island spread in organized beauty, training grounds where warriors sparred, libraries where scholars debated, temples where priestesses maintained humanity's connection to the divine. Look at what we've built. Prince Thor, 3,000 years of peace maintained through strength, wisdom earned through eternal vigilance, purpose that never wavers despite isolation's temptation. It is beautiful, Thor said honestly, like Asgard in its best days, before politics and pride made us forget why we wielded power at all. Exactly. Hippolyta turned to face him fully. You come from a realm of gods who've forgotten their purpose, arriving in a universe where gods regularly forget theirs. Zeus became tyrant and rapist. Ares feeds on war. The new gods split between tyranny and idealism so absolute it becomes its own prison. Even your Justice League, Diana, tells me this universe once had a Superman who became dictator, ruling through fear masquerading as order. The injustice timeline, Diana confirmed quietly. In another reality, Superman lost everything and decided peace was worth any cost, including freedom. Thor's grip on Mjolnir tightened. And did your Justice League stop him? Eventually, Diana said, but only after years of civil war. Heroes killing heroes. Friends becoming enemies. The scars still haven't fully healed. This is why I brought you here, Hippolyta said, her voice carrying the weight of maternal concern and royal command equally. Because Darkseid isn't your only threat, Prince Thor. This universe itself is a threat. It has a way of taking noble beings and twisting them. Superman became tyrant. Batman became paranoid hunter. Even Diana has been tempted by shortcuts that compromise our ideals. She held up a hand as Diana opened her mouth to protest. You have, daughter. We all have. That's not weakness. It's the nature of this reality. Darkness presses close here. Hope must be defended constantly, or it curdles into despair wearing heroic masks. Thor looked out at Themyscira, understanding crystallizing. Thou art warning me that this universe will test my worthiness more thoroughly than any battle. Yes, Hippolyta said bluntly. You wield a hammer that judges worth. But who judges the judge? If you're here long enough, this reality will offer you temptations wrapped in noble purpose. The chance to end suffering by ruling. The opportunity to prevent tragedy through preemptive violence. The seductive logic that absolute power, wielded absolutely, could create perfect peace. The injustice question, Thor breathed. Exactly. Hippolyta moved closer, her eyes boring into his with intensity that made even a god shift uncomfortably. So I ask you now, while you're still whole, still certain, if you had the power to end all war, all crime, all suffering, but only by becoming tyrant, would you seize it? The question hung in the air like Mjolnir before striking. Thor looked at the hammer in his hand, feeling its weight both physical and metaphorical. He thought of Asgard, of his father's compromises and secrets. He thought of his brother Loki, whose justified grievances had curdled into malevolence. He thought of every time he'd seen good intentions pave roads to darkness. No, he said finally, the word carrying absolute conviction. For the cost would be everything the peace was meant to protect. Freedom matters not because it creates perfect outcomes, but because beings stripped of choice cease to be beings at all. They become possessions, and I will not make possessions of those I swore to protect. Silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. Then Hippolyta smiled, genuine warmth breaking through royal formality. Good. Then perhaps you'll survive this universe after all. She clasped his shoulder with surprising strength. While you remain here, Prince Thor, know that Themyscira stands with you. Not just against Darkseid's plots, but against the more insidious corruption this reality offers to heroes who believe their power makes them wise. Thank you, Your Majesty, Thor said, bowing his head in genuine respect. I begin to understand why Diana is the warrior she is. She was forged in certainty rarer than you metal. We're all forged, Hippolyta corrected gently. The question is whether we're tempered or merely hardened. Tempered steel bends before breaking. Hardened steel shatters. She released his shoulder and stepped back. Now, I believe my warriors wish to test whether Asgardian combat prowess matches its reputation. Diana, take your friend to the training grounds. Let him remember what it feels like to fight for joy rather than survival. Diana grinned. Actual excitement rather than warriors' anticipation. Mother, are you sure? Last time we had exhibition matches, we had to rebuild half the arena. Then we'll rebuild again. Hippolyta said with the kind of pragmatism that came from immortality. Some lessons are worth the construction costs. As they left the throne room, Thor felt something he hadn't experienced since arriving in this universe. Not just respect or alliance, but understanding. Themyscira was what Asgard claimed to be but often failed to achieve. Power serving purpose rather than purpose justifying power. If he could maintain that clarity, while facing whatever darkness this reality would inevitably throw at him, perhaps Mjolnir's judgment would remain unchanged. Perhaps he could remain worthy even when surrounded by gods who'd forgotten how. Behind them, Hippolyta watched from the balcony as Thor and Diana descended toward the training grounds. She'd seen countless heroes over 3 millennia. Some rose to their challenges. Others fell to them. The Asgardian felt solid, certain. But then, so had Superman before. Tragedy taught him that certainty was merely confidence that hadn't been tested hard enough. Time would tell. It always did. And in a universe where even hope could become weapon, time was the only judge whose verdict couldn't be appealed. The training grounds of Themyscira stretched across a natural amphitheater carved by ancient hands into living rock. Its floor packed earth that had drunk the sweat of warriors for 3,000 years. Tiers of stone seating rose in concentric circles. And by the time Thor and Diana reached the arena floor, every seat was filled with Amazons eager to witness something unprecedented, a god from another universe testing himself against their princess. Thor surveyed the crowd with warriors' appreciation. These were not spectators seeking entertainment, but students studying technique, veterans assessing capability, sisters supporting their champion. He'd fought before crowds in Asgard's halls, but those audiences had come for spectacle and glory. These warriors came for education. The rules are simple, Diana announced, her voice carrying to every tier without strain. She'd donned her full armor again, breastplate gleaming, bracers catching sunlight, sword and shield manifesting from wherever. She kept them when diplomacy required softer presentation. No killing blows, no permanent maiming. Combat ends when one fighter yields or cannot continue. She met Thor's eyes with challenge, bright as Helios's chariot. And since you're guest, you may choose the parameters. Weapons or hand-to-hand, full power or restrained. Thor grinned, the expression fierce and joyful in equal measure. Weapons. And I would be insulted if thou didst restrain thyself, princess. I came to test myself against a daughter of Zeus, not a warrior playing at godhood. Appreciative murmurs rippled through the crowd. Diana's smile matched his own, predator recognizing worthy prey. Then let us see if Asgardian thunder can match Olympian fury. They took positions at opposite ends of the arena. Thor spun Mjolnir by its strap, building momentum that made the air hum with gathering energy. Diana raised her shield, sword held low and ready. Stance perfect as Pythagorean proof. For a moment, 2 divine warriors stood in absolute stillness. The calm before devastation. Then they moved. Diana closed the distance first, her warrior's instinct favoring controlled space over reactive defense. She came in fast but measured, shield raised to deflect rather than absorb, sword striking for Thor's exposed ribs in a blow calculated to test defense without committing to full assault. Thor twisted, Mjolnir intercepting the blade with a sound like mountains arguing, and the shockwave of God-forged metal meeting divinely. Blessed steel rippled across the arena floor in visible waves. They separated, circled. Diana's eyes narrowed in reassessment. That parry had been textbook perfect, not lucky improvisation. Thor's grin widened as he registered her speed and precision. This wasn't going to be the slugfest he'd shared with Hulk or the cosmic chess match against Thanos. This was art performed at velocities that would liquefy mortals. Diana struck again, this time a faint high that became low sweep, her sword seeking to hamstring while her shield bash aimed for his center mass. Thor leaped, Mjolnir's momentum carrying him up and over the attacks. And he brought the hammer down in an overhead strike that would have cratered lesser warriors. Diana's bracers snapped up, crossing to catch the blow, and the impact detonated like thunderclap, made solid. Both fighters staggered back, Diana's bracers smoked slightly from the lightning discharge. Thor's arms vibrated from the recoil. Those bracers had absorbed and redirected force that should have shattered bones. They'd barely begun, and already the match had escalated past what most beings could survive. Witnessing up close. Impressive, Diana called, rolling her shoulders to disperse residual energy. Your hammer strikes like Zeus's lightning given weight and purpose, and thy bracers turn aside blows that have felled frost giants, Thor replied, shaking out his arms. Thy father's gifts serve thee well, princess. These weren't gifts, Diana corrected, her tone carrying edge. They're tools I've earned through 3,000 years of training and combat. Zeus contributed biology. Everything else is Amazon forging. Thor's grin faded into something more respectful. Then let me rephrase. Thy skill honors the warriors who trained thee. Shall we continue? Diana's answer was to blur forward with speed that made Thor's enhanced perception struggle to track. She'd been holding back, he realized, testing his baseline before revealing true capability. Now she fought as Wonder Woman, blessed of Olympus. Trained by warriors who'd perfected violence into philosophy, her sword became silver lightning, striking from angles that shouldn't exist, while her shield work turned defense into offensive pressure that gave Thor no breathing room. He met her fury with stormborn wrath, Mjolnir singing through strike patterns that had defended Asgard for millennia. Lightning crackled between exchanges, not called deliberately, but bleeding from Thor's divine nature under combat stress. The arena floor began to crack from impact tremors. Dust rose in choking clouds that neither warrior noticed, their enhanced senses tracking each other through any obscurement. Diana's shield rim caught Thor's jaw, snapping his head back. Thor's hammer tagged her shoulder, spinning her sideways. They traded blows with the casual brutality of beings who regenerated, damage faster than it accumulated, each strike teaching, each parry refining technique. The watching Amazons had gone silent, their warrior souls recognizing something rare. Two divine combatants, so evenly matched that the outcome would be decided by will, rather than power differential. Then Diana changed tactics. Her lasso materialized in her offhand, the golden rope blazing with compulsion truth. She threw it not to bind, but to confuse, the loop forcing Thor to dodge while she closed inside Mjolnir's reach. Too close for the hammer's momentum to build. Her sword found his ribs, not cutting deep, but scoring armor. Drawing first blood, Thor snarled and called lightning directly, bypassing the hammer. Electricity erupting from his body in spherical discharge. Diana's bracers rose instinctively, absorbing the current, but the force still blasted her backward. She rolled with the throw, came up already moving, and hurled her shield like a discus blessed by physics-defying gods. The shield screamed through air, rebounded off the arena wall, and came at Thor from behind, while Diana charged from the front, pincer attack that left him milliseconds to decide. Thor chose offense. He swung Mjolnir in full rotation, letting the hammer's momentum carry him into a spin that intercepted both shield and warrior. The shield redirected skyward, tumbling into clouds. Diana's charge met hammer strike head-on, and the collision was apocalyptic. Stone shattered. Air pressure waves flattened the dust. Amazons in the front rows threw up defensive arms against the shockwave. When the dust cleared, Thor and Diana stood locked, Mjolnir pressed against crossed bracers, neither giving ground. Divine strength matched so perfectly that tectonic shifts seemed likely before either yielded. They were inches apart, eyes locked, breathing hard not from exhaustion, but from pure combat joy. Yield? Diana asked through gritted teeth. Never, Thor replied, grinning despite the strain. Thou? Not in this lifetime. They held the deadlock for 3 more heartbeats, muscles trembling with effort that would snap steel cables, power blazing between them like miniature sun. Then, by unspoken agreement, they disengaged simultaneously, stepping back with matching respect. Draw, Thor offered. Draw, Diana agreed, and her smile was genuine warmth rather than warrior's challenge. You fight well, Thor of Asgard. I've sparred with Superman, traded blows with Ares himself. You're worthy of both comparisons. And thou art every bit the warrior thy reputation suggests, Thor replied, accepting the compliment for the gift it was. In Asgard, we would compose sagas of such matches. Here, I suspect thy sisters will speak of it for. The sky went dark, not the natural darkness of sunset or storm clouds, but wrongness, light itself forgetting how to exist. The warmth fled from the air as if fleeing predator. And then the sound came. The mechanical shriek of reality being carved, opened by technology that treated space-time as suggestion rather than law. Boom tubes, dozens of them, opening in perfect geometric formation above Themyscira. Thor and Diana's eyes met for single instant. Combat camaraderie transforming into battlefield alliance without word needed. They turned as one to face the sky, where through the bleeding portals came not Parademon, cannon fodder, but something far worse. The female furies descended like judgment made manifest. Granny Goodness led them, her armor gleaming blood-red against the unnatural darkness. Beside her floated Lashina, her living energy whips already crackling with eagerness. Stampa's massive form made the air compress with each descending footstep despite still being airborne. Bernadette's twin knives caught non-existent light, and Mad Harriet cackled with the kind of enthusiasm that suggested sanity had been optional equipment. She declined. Behind them, Father Boxes pulsed with corrupted new god technology, maintaining the boom tubes against Themyscira's magical wards with brute force calculation. But it was the figure emerging last that made Thor's blood go cold. Kalibak, Darkseid's son, stood 12 feet of pure violence contained in living armor and permanent rage. His beta club, a weapon that literally channeled the anti-life equation into kinetic force, rested on his shoulder, casually despite weighing tons. He looked down at Thor with eyes that held nothing but contempt for beings who weren't born to Apocalypse's fire. Asgardian. Kalibak's voice boomed across Themyscira like declaration of war. My father sends greeting and final offer. Surrender the hammer willingly. Submit to his divine purpose, and your death will be swift. Refuse. His grin showed teeth filed to points. And I am authorized to demonstrate why Apocalypse breaks all who resist. Amazons poured from every building, weapons appearing in trained hands with drill-perfect precision. Archers took positions on walls. Spear maidens formed phalanx formations. The battle hadn't started, and already Themyscira had transformed from peaceful paradise into fortress prepared for siege. 3,000 years of warrior discipline made manifest in seconds. Hippolyta emerged from the palace, her ceremonial robes replaced by battle armor that predated written language, a sword in her hand that had drunk the blood of monsters when the world was young. She looked up at the Furies with expression colder than Helheim's deepest pit. This is sacred ground, the Amazon Queen declared, her voice carrying divine authority that made even Kalibak pause. Protected by Olympus, blessed by Hestia, consecrated in blood of those who sacrificed everything for peace. You dare violate sanctuary with your master's corruption? Sanctuary ends when harboring enemies of Darkseid, Granny Goodness replied, her grandmotherly effect making the threat more obscene. Surrender the Asgardian and the hammer. Refuse, and we shall teach these Amazons why Apocalypse has conquered 1,000 worlds while they hide on one small island. Thor stepped forward, Mjolnir blazing with gathering storm. Every instinct screamed to meet this challenge alone, to prevent Amazon blood spilling for his sake. But Diana's hand on his shoulder stopped him. We fight together, she said quietly, certainty absolute. That's what this means. She gestured at the assembled Amazons, at her mother's unwavering stance, at the island itself rising to war footing. You're not alone anymore, Thor. And Themyscira doesn't surrender to tyrants. Never have, Hippolyta added, her sword raised high. Never will. Amazons. Her voice rang like clarion. Call across battlefield yet to be consecrated with violence. Show these new gods why old gods still matter. For Themyscira, the answering war cry from 3,000 throats shook the very stones. Arrows darkened the sky. Spears bristled like steel forest. And Thor, son of Odin, prince of Asgard, stood shoulder to shoulder with Diana, princess of Themyscira, and understood something fundamental. He'd thought arriving in this universe was accident. But standing here, facing down tyrants' servants alongside warriors who chose honor over survival, he wondered if perhaps the Norns had woven this thread deliberately. Perhaps this reality needed reminding that worthiness wasn't determined by power alone, that some beings would fight corruption even when victory seemed impossible. Perhaps, for however long he remained here, he could teach this universe what Asgard had learned through bitter experience. Tyranny only thrives when good beings choose convenience over conviction. Come then, Thor roared, his voice carrying godly challenge that made the clouds themselves tremble. Let Darkseid's servants learn why Asgard kneels to none. Let Apocalypse discover that stolen technology cannot match warriors' honor. Let the storm answer their darkness. Lightning answered his call, not the restrained control he'd shown in sparring, but the full fury of Asgardian stormborn wrath. The sky ignited with electric rage, and the battle for Themyscira began in thunder. And war cries that would echo across dimensions. Darkseid had come for Thor's hammer. He would learn, at great cost, that some weapons could not be taken by force, only earned, only wielded by the worthy, only defended by those who understood that power. Without purpose was merely tyranny, waiting to happen. The battle for Themyscira exploded into violence that would have shattered lesser islands into geological memory. Kalibak descended like meteor strike, his beta club swinging an arc that could pulverize mountains, aimed directly at Thor's skull with the casual certainty of someone who'd never met resistance he couldn't bludgeon into submission. Thor met the strike with Mjolnir, and when God-forged hammer intercepted anti-life weapon, the collision produced shockwave that cracked the arena floor in perfect radial pattern and sent Amazons stumbling despite battle-hardened balance. You are strong, Kalibak bellowed, genuine surprise coloring his perpetual rage. Good. Weak prey bores me. He swung again, three-strike combination that would have liquefied mountains. Thor parried, dodged, counterattacked with hammer strike that caught Kalibak's ribs and actually drove the new god backward 3 steps. Lightning crackled across impact point, scorching armor that had withstood Superman's heat vision. Kalibak's surprise transformed into something more dangerous, respect married to escalating fury. Around them, Themyscira became crucible. Diana launched herself at Granny Goodness, sword singing as it carved through air toward the matriarch of Apocalypse's torture chambers. Granny's mega rod intercepted the blade, energy weapons clashing in spray of sparks that burned cold rather than hot. Oh child, Granny cooed with grotesque affection. Did you think warrior training could match millennia perfecting agony? I shall educate you in suffering's finest arts. I've fought Ares, Diana snarled, pressing her attack with Amazon fury. Your corruption is amateur compared to the god of war's malevolence. Lashina's energy whips cracked across battlefield toward Amazon archer positions. The whips moved like living serpents, seeking flesh with malicious intelligence. But Themyscira's warriors weren't ceremonial guards playing at combat. They were 3,000-year veterans of fighting impossible odds. The archers scattered in practiced dispersal patterns while spear maidens surged forward, their formation turning Lashina's reach advantage into liability. 6 Amazons attacking in coordinated strikes, spears finding gaps in armor with precision born of endless drilling. Stampa's massive foot came down on phalanx formation, crater strike that should have scattered warriors like leaves. Instead, the Amazons rolled with impact, using the shockwave's momentum to launch themselves at Stampa's exposed joints. Swords seeking the weak points all armor possessed if one had skill to find them. Stampa howled, actual pain rather than rage, as Themysciran steel found synthetic flesh between armor plates. Bernadette moved like assassin given divine purpose, her knives seeking Amazon commanders with tactical awareness that spoke of countless conquered worlds. But she'd never fought Hippolyta, queen of Amazons, woman who'd warred with Zeus himself and lived. The Amazon queen met Bernadette's speed with economy of motion that made violence look like dance, her ancient sword deflecting knife strikes while her free hand caught Bernadette's wrist and twisted with strength that made new god bones creak. You chose the wrong island to invade, Hippolyta said, her voice carrying royal judgment. We are not civilians cowering before superior force. We are Amazons, and we have been waiting 3,000 years for worthy challenge. She drove her knee into Bernadette's solar plexus, following with pommel strike that cracked the Fury's helmet and sent her tumbling. Mad Harriet lived up to her name, cackling as she threw razor discs that carved through stone and steel alike. But Amazon warriors had faced worse. They battled Hydra's regenerating heads, fought Cerberus at Underworld's gate, stood against things Harriet's madness couldn't comprehend. They adapted, using shields not as static defense, but as mobile redirection, bouncing the razor discs back at their source. Harriet's laughter transformed into genuine surprise as her own weapons carved lines across her armor. But the heart of battle remained Thor versus Kalibak. They traded blows with apocalyptic intensity, each strike capable of ending civilizations if aim found flesh instead of weapon. Kalibak fought with rage-born strength and new god endurance, his beta club channeling the anti-life equations, nihilistic mathematics into pure, destructive force. Thor matched him with Asgardian fury and worthiness-granted power, Mjolnir singing with enchantments that had defended 9 realms since before Earth knew civilization. "My father will break your hammer," Kalibak roared, spittle flying from his fanged mouth. "He will corrupt its enchantments and prove that worthiness is lie, that only power matters, that Darkseid is ultimate." "Thy father," Thor grunted, deflecting Beta Club strike that cratered the ground beside him, "is coward who sends son to fight battles while he cowers on burning world." He swung Mjolnir in rising uppercut that caught Kalibak's jaw and actually lifted the massive new god off his feet. "If he desires my hammer, let him come himself rather than hide behind children and servants." Kalibak's response was wordless bellow that made the very air compress. He charged with reckless abandon that spoke more of wounded pride than tactical thinking. Beta Club raised for strike that would shatter continents. Thor planted his feet, called lightning from clear sky, and channeled everything: Odin force, Asgardian heritage, worthy determination, into Mjolnir. They met in collision that transcended mere physics. The shockwave radiated outward in visible sphere of compressed air and displaced energy. Every combatant on the battlefield, Amazon, Fury, God, and Mortal, staggered from the pressure wave. Stone cracked. Ancient trees bent horizontal. The ocean itself retreated from Themyscira. Shores as water fled the epicenter of forces that treated natural law as polite suggestion. When the devastation cleared, Thor and Kalibak stood locked, Mjolnir pressed against Beta Club, neither weapon yielding, both channeling so much power that reality itself seemed to thin around them. Lightning arced from hammer to club and back again. Corrupted Father Bach's technology meeting. Odin's enchantments in conflict as much philosophical as physical. "Yield," Thor commanded through gritted teeth. "Tell thy father that worthiness cannot be stolen, only earned." "Never." Kalibak's eyes blazed with Omega energy inheritance, red light bleeding through his pupils. "Darkseid never yields. Apocalypse never retreats. We are conquest incarnate." "Then," Thor said, and his voice carried the certainty of thunder that had rolled since universe's first storm, "learn that conquest ends when it meets unbreakable will." He released one hand from Mjolnir, insanity, in weapon-lock combat, and thrust his palm directly into Kalibak's chest. Lightning erupted not from hand, but through the new god, channeling divine fury directly into his core. Kalibak's armor was designed to resist external attack, energy weapons, even magic. But this wasn't assault from outside. This was lightning delivered into his center mass, bypassing all defense through direct contact. Kalibak's scream was primal and raw. His grip on the Beta Club faltered. Thor seized the moment, bringing Mjolnir around and strike that caught the new god's temple with all of Asgard's fury behind it. The sound was like planets colliding. Kalibak's massive form launched backward, tumbling through air, crashing through ancient temple wall, skidding across marble plaza beyond in trench of devastation. He did not rise immediately. Kalibak, Granny Goodness's grandmotherly effect shattered into genuine alarm. She disengaged from Diana with blast from her megarod. That forced the Amazon princess back, then raised her hand toward the sky. Father boxes throughout the battlefield pulsed in unison, responding to her command. New boom tubes erupted, but these were retreat vectors, extraction coordinates. The female furies, recognizing tactical defeat, began falling back toward the portals with military discipline. Lashina's whips lashed out not to attack, but to create covering fire. Stampa's ground pounds became defensive perimeter rather than offensive assault. Bernadotte, nursing broken ribs from Hippolyta's assault, limped toward salvation with whatever remained of her dignity. Mad Harriet went last, her cackles fading into the portals like nightmare dissipating at dawn. "We'll be back," she sang, "with more toys, better weapons, Darkseid's personal attention." Granny Goodness hauled Kalibak's semi-conscious form toward the largest boom tube, her expression cycling between fury and calculation. She looked at Thor, at Diana, at the assembled Amazons who'd fought, new gods to stand still despite supposedly being mere mortals elevated slightly by divine blood. This was reconnaissance, she declared, as if defeat had been intended outcome all along. "You've shown your capabilities. Now Darkseid knows precisely how much force is required." Her smile returned, sharp and predatory. "Enjoy your victory, Asgardian. Savor this moment, because the next time we meet, my master himself will come. And when Darkseid walks upon your precious earth, gods and mortals alike will kneel or burn. Let him come." Thor roared, lightning still crackling across his armor. "I am Thor, son of Odin, and I do not kneel." Granny's laugh was genuine and deeply unsettling. "Oh child, everyone kneels eventually. It's merely question of how much pain precedes. Surrender." She stepped backward, into the boom tube. Kalibak's unconscious form dragged with her. "We shall resume this education shortly." The boom tubes collapsed with sound like reality healing from infection. Silence fell across Themyscira, not peaceful quiet, but stunned aftermath. The kind of stillness that followed storms when survival itself seemed temporary grace, rather than guaranteed outcome. Thor stood in the ruined arena, chest heaving, Mjolnir still blazing with residual energy. Around him, Amazons slowly lowered weapons, combat readiness bleeding into cautious relief. They'd won. Impossibly, incredibly. They'd fought Apocalypse's elite and sent them retreating. But no one cheered, because they all understood what Granny Goodness's parting words meant. This had been probe, not full invasion. Test of capabilities before real assault. Darkseid now knew Thor's power level, Diana's tactics, Amazon defensive patterns, Themyscira's magical wards. He had data. And Darkseid, Lord of Apocalypse, seeker of anti-life equation, was nothing if not patient calculator of overwhelming victory. Diana approached Thor, her armor scored and smoking, but the woman beneath unbroken. "You fought well. Kalibak has traded blows with Superman and held his ground. You beat him decisively. He'll return stronger," Thor said quietly, the battle fury fading into strategic assessment. With Father Box enhancements, tactical adaptations, perhaps even Omega Sanction authorization from Darkseid himself. "Yes," Diana agreed without comfort. "That's how Apocalypse works. They probe, they learn, they return with overwhelming force calculated to specific weaknesses." She looked around at her home, at the cracked stones and scorched earth, at the Amazons tending wounded sisters. "We need to evacuate. If Darkseid himself comes." "No." Hippolyta's voice cut across the battlefield like blade across silk. The Amazon queen approached, her ancient sword still drawn, her eyes blazing with fury. That had nothing to do with battle and everything to do with sovereignty violated. "We do not abandon Themyscira. Not for Apocalypse. Not for any threat." "Mother," Diana started. "No, Diana." Hippolyta's tone softened, but her certainty remained absolute. 3,000 years we have held this island against darkness, against men who would enslave us, monsters who would devour us, gods who would use us. We have never run. We will not start now." "Your Majesty," Thor said carefully, "I appreciate thy courage, but this assault came because I am here. If I departed, perhaps Darkseid would find another excuse to assault sacred ground." Hippolyta interrupted, her warrior's pragmatism cutting through diplomatic niceties. "Do not imagine this is solely about you, Prince Thor. Darkseid has coveted our magical defenses for decades. Your presence merely gave him convenient justification. If you leave, he'll claim we harbor knowledge he requires, or technology, or simply that our continued independence offends him." She sheathed her sword with finality. "No. If Apocalypse wants war, we give them war. And we give it to them here, on ground of our choosing, with allies who actually stand for something beyond power." Thor looked at Diana, seeing conflict war across her features. The princess who'd left Themyscira to protect man's world, now watching that choice potentially bring destruction home. But underneath the conflict was something else: pride. Her mother, her people, choosing principle over survival, standing against tyranny even when calculation suggested retreat. "Then I stand with thee," Thor declared, the words carrying oath weight. "If Themyscira fights, Asgard's son fights beside it. Let Darkseid come. Let him bring his Omega sanction and his armies and his anti-life equation. He will find that worthiness is not measured in power accumulated, but in power wielded for purpose beyond self." Hippolyta's expression softened into something approaching affection. "Now you begin to understand why Zeus feared Amazons more than he feared Titans. We cannot be broken because we never mistake survival for victory. Victory is maintaining our principles. Everything else is merely tactics." A boom of different thunder, not Thor's storm but javelin, 7 engines screaming atmospheric entry. The Justice League transport descended rapidly, ramp lowering before landing complete. Superman emerged first, his cape streaming behind him, followed by Batman's darker presence and Flash's vibrating urgency. "We picked up boom tube signatures worldwide," Superman said without preamble, his eyes scanning the battlefield, cataloging damage and casualties with speed that suggested tactical assessment already running. "Themyscira's wards finally failed enough to let through our scanners." "What happened?" "Darkseid made his move," Diana reported, falling into mission briefing mode effortlessly. "Sent the female Furies and Kalibak as assault force. Thor defeated Kalibak. We drove them back. For now," Batman added, his cowl scanning the battlefield with sensors Thor couldn't identify. "But Granny Goodness doesn't retreat unless ordered. Which means Darkseid got what he came for. Intelligence," Thor realized, the tactical picture crystallizing. "He sent expendable forces not to capture me, but to measure me. To learn how I fight, what powers I wield, how I adapt to." He stopped, horror dawning. "The Mother Box. At the Hall of Justice. It's vulnerable during battle." Batman's expression behind the cowl shifted into something that might have been respect, if buried under 12 layers of paranoia. "Already considered. Cyborg is moving it to secondary containment. But you're right to be concerned. If Darkseid can't take your hammer by force, he'll try to corrupt it through understanding. Break down the enchantments mathematically until he can. Reverse engineer worthiness judgment into unworthiness proof. Then we can't let him study it further," Superman said, his tactical mind clearly working scenarios. "Thor, I know this isn't what you want to hear, but maybe we need to get you off Earth. Find somewhere in the universe where Darkseid can't." "No." Thor and Hippolyta spoke simultaneously, their refusal harmonizing into single absolute rejection. Superman blinked, surprised by the unity. "I'm trying to protect. You're trying to run," Hippolyta said bluntly, which is understandable strategically but catastrophic philosophically. "If heroes of your stature flee every time Darkseid threatens, you teach the universe that his power matters more than your principles. You validate his claim that might makes right." "She's correct," Thor added, his voice carrying Asgardian certainty. "In my universe, Asgard stood against Surtur when every calculation suggested retreat. We held Bifrost against impossible odds because yielding would mean admitting that some evils are too powerful to resist. And if we admit that," he met Superman's eyes directly, "then we become accomplices to tyranny through our cowardice." Silence stretched across the ruined arena. Flash vibrated uncomfortably. Batman's expression remained unreadable behind his cowl, but Superman's face showed conflict that Thor recognized: the burden of godlike power married to deep compassion, the impossible calculus of weighing billions of lives against abstract principle. Finally, Superman's shoulders straightened with decision made. "Then we stand here, on Themyscira, with Amazon allies and whatever other forces we can muster. We make this the line Darkseid cannot cross." His eyes hardened into something that reminded Thor why this Kryptonian wore the symbol of hope. "And when he comes, we teach him that Earth, any Earth, across any reality, will never kneel to apocalypse." Thunder rolled across the Themyscira's sky, though whether from Thor's divine nature or simple atmospheric approval, none could say. The die was cast, the line drawn. When Darkseid came, and he would come, As certain as entropy, he would find not scattered resistance, but unified defiance. Gods and mortals, Amazons and aliens, powered and unpowered, standing shoulder to shoulder against tyranny incarnate. It would be glorious, or it would be catastrophic. Perhaps both simultaneously. But it would be worthy. The Watchtower's strategic command center had transformed into war room, hosting the kind of council that would have made Odin's round table look modest. Thor stood among Earth's mightiest defenders, and the sheer diversity of power assembled would have given even Thanos pause. Superman floated near the holographic display, his cape defying physics as usual. Batman worked 3 separate computer stations simultaneously, his cowl's white eyes reflecting cascading data. Wonder Woman stood in full armor, fresh from Themyscira's fortifications. The Flash vibrated in place, burning nervous energy. Green Lantern's ring cast emerald light across tactical projections. Cyborg interfaced directly with the Watchtower systems, his technological eye blazing. Martian Manhunter phased partially through a wall, his telepathic presence a calm anchor amid rising tension. But they weren't alone. New arrivals filled the command center, heroes answering the call when word spread that Darkseid himself was coming. Shazam, Billy Batson wearing divine power like borrowed suit, stood near. Thor with wide-eyed enthusiasm that reminded the Asgardian of younger, more optimistic days. Hawkman and Hawkgirl, reincarnated warriors carrying nth metal weapons that hummed with anti-magic properties, positioned themselves near the tactical displays with veterans' focus. Black Canary's presence added street-level practicality to cosmic-scale planning. Green Arrow provided ground perspective that balanced aerial advantage. Even Aquaman had risen from Atlantis' depths, his trident crackling with ocean's fury. 7 seas worth of reinforcements pledged if needed. And in the corner, smoking despite regulations, stood John Constantine, trench coat, loosened tie, cigarette dangling with studied indifference that fooled absolutely no one. The magician's presence made Thor's divine senses itch. This was practitioner who'd conned demons and traded favors with angels, who'd damned friends to save worlds and somehow lived with himself afterward. Right then, Constantine drawled, his Liverpool accent cutting through tactical chatter like knife through pretension. Let's establish ground rules before we all go rushing off to die gloriously. Darkseid isn't bloody doomsday or brainiac. He's not monster to punch or computer to outsmart. He's concept given form. Tyranny incarnate, anti-life made flesh. You can't beat him by being stronger or faster or more righteous. You beat him by being willing to sacrifice what he cannot comprehend sacrificing. Spare us the fatalism. Constantine, Batman said without looking up from his tactical calculations. We've fought Darkseid before. We know what we're facing. Do you? Constantine took long drag. Exhaled smoke that shouldn't exist in recycled atmosphere. Because from where I'm standing, you're planning to defend Themyscira against full apocalypse invasion. That's not tactics, mate. That's suicide with extra steps. You have alternative suggestion? Diana asked, her tone carrying warning that Constantine apparently chose to ignore. Yeah, don't. He gestured at Thor with his cigarette. Our Asgardian friend there? He's bait. Darkseid doesn't give 2 shits about conquering Earth. He's tried that. Failed repeatedly, moved on. He wants the hammer because its enchantments represent something he's spent millennia seeking. Mathematical proof that worthiness exists. If he gets it, reverse engineers it, corrupts it. Constantine's expression lost all humor. He gets the anti-life equation. And everything, every universe, every reality, every soul across all existence becomes his property, which is precisely why we must protect Thor, Superman said firmly. We can't let Darkseid. You can't stop him, Constantine interrupted, and his bluntness carried weight of someone who'd stared into abyss and seen it yawn with boredom. Not through force. Darkseid is new god, actual bloody god, not dressed up alien or superpowered mortal. His true form exists on Apocalypse. What you fight here is Avatar, projection. You can kill him 1,000 times. He'll just manifest new body and try again. Thor's hand tightened on Mjolnir. Then how do we end this? Surely thy universe has faced such threats before. We have, Batman said, finally turning from his computers. And Constantine's right about one thing, direct confrontation. with Darkseid's true form is impossible. His actual presence would crush Earth under metaphysical weight alone. We've always fought his avatars, his invasions, his schemes. He paused, cowl tilting toward Thor. But we've never had leverage before. Leverage, Thor repeated. Your hammer, Batman explained, bringing up holographic analysis of Mjolnir's enchantments that made Thor distinctly uncomfortable about how much data the Dark Knight had apparently collected. Darkseid wants it, desperately, which means for first time in decades, we have something he needs more than we need to survive. That's not vulnerability, that's negotiating position. You want to trade Thor's hammer to Darkseid? Diana's voice went dangerously quiet. I want to use the threat of its destruction as leverage, Batman corrected. If Thor can demonstrate that Mjolnir's enchantments will self-destruct, rather than submit to corruption. If we can make Darkseid believe that attacking will trigger failsafe that eliminates the hammer entirely. He met Thor's eyes directly. Then suddenly invasion becomes too risky. Darkseid retreats. Thor gets time to find way home. Earth avoids apocalyptic war. Silence fell across the command center as assembled heroes processed the proposal. Thor could see logic in Batman's calculation, pragmatic, ruthless, effective. It was exactly the kind of political maneuvering Odin would approve of. The warrior king compromise that preserved power through implied rather than demonstrated force. It was also a lie built on foundation that Thor wasn't certain could support weight of godly scrutiny. The enchantments don't have such failsafe, Thor said quietly. My father placed worthiness judgment upon Mjolnir, but no self-destruct mechanism. If Darkseid captured the hammer, if he spent enough time studying it, he forced himself to speak the terrible truth, he might actually succeed. The enchantments are mathematics, as Constantine said, and mathematics can be inverted. Then we make the failsafe real, Cyborg suggested, his technological mind already running scenarios. I could integrate Mother Box technology with Mjolnir's enchantments. Create actual deadman switch that triggers if. No. Thor's refusal came sharp as Mjolnir's edge. The hammer is gift from my father, tool of Asgard's protection. I will not corrupt it with new god technology, not even to save myself. He looked around at assembled heroes, seeing frustration and concern warring across their features. I appreciate thy desire to protect me, truly, but there are some prices too high to pay even for survival. Noble, Constantine said with enough sarcasm to etch glass. And completely fucking stupid. You'd rather die than compromise sacred weapon? Rather let Darkseid win than admit pragmatism sometimes requires dirty hands. Thor met the magician's cynical gaze without flinching. I would rather die worthy than live having betrayed everything worthiness means. If that makes me stupid in thy eyes, wizard, then I accept such judgment gladly. Constantine stared at him for a long moment, cigarette burning forgotten between his fingers. Then, incredibly, he smiled, genuine expression that transformed his face from world-weary cynic into something approaching respect. Bloody hell, you actually mean it. He took final drag, stubbed out cigarette on own palm without flinching. Right then, new plan. We don't compromise the hammer. We don't corrupt its enchantments. We don't play Darkseid's game using his rules. Then what do we do? Flash asked, voicing question everyone was thinking. Constantine's smile widened into something that made Thor's divine instincts scream warnings. We cheat. We lie. We con the biggest bastard in the universe using the one weapon he can't defend against. His own absolute certainty that he's already won. Batman's cowl tilted, interest peaked despite himself. Explain. Darkseid seeks anti-life equation. Proof that free will is meaningless. That all beings are worthless. That existence itself is mistake waiting to be corrected. Constantine began, pacing now, his hands sketching concepts in air. He thinks Thor's hammer provides mathematical framework for such proof, because its enchantments judge worthiness. But that's not what Mjolnir actually does, is it? Thor frowned, uncertain where this was heading. The hammer measures worthiness. Those who possess proper character may wield it. Exactly. Constantine pointed at him. It measures. It doesn't create or destroy worth. It observes and judges. Which means the enchantments aren't proof that worthiness can be mathematically defined. They're proof that worthiness is real but transcends pure mathematics. The hammer recognizes quality that exists beyond equation. I'm not following, Superman admitted. The anti-life equation is supposed to prove that life has no inherent value. Constantine continued, his passion building despite cynical effect. But if Mjolnir's enchantments prove that worthiness exists as measurable, quality yet cannot be reduced to pure mathematics, then anti-life equation becomes impossible by definition. You can't prove life is meaningless if meaning itself is real but transcendent. Diana's eyes widened with understanding. The hammer isn't vulnerability. It's counterargument. Living proof that Darkseid's entire quest is fundamentally flawed. Bingo, Constantine confirmed. Which Darkseid probably suspects. Why he wants to corrupt the enchantments rather than simply study them. If he can invert the logic, prove that unworthiness is fundamental state and worthiness is illusion, then anti-life equation becomes possible again. But if Thor demonstrates that the hammer's judgment cannot be corrupted, that worthiness remains constant even under assault, then we haven't just defeated Darkseid's current scheme. Batman finished, his tactical mind seizing the philosophical weapon. We've undermined his entire existence purpose, proven that the thing he sought for millennia is impossible to achieve. Thor felt something shift in his understanding of this universe. He'd arrived thinking himself merely refugee seeking home. But perhaps the Norns, or whatever forces governed destiny in this reality, had brought him here for exactly this moment. Not to fight Darkseid physically, but to stand as living contradiction to everything the tyrant represented. There's one problem. Martian Manhunter's telepathic voice echoed in their minds. Gentle but concerned. Darkseid won't accept philosophical defeat gracefully. If we prove his quest is futile, he may simply destroy everything out of spite. Burn Earth to ash rather than admit failure. Then we need insurance, Batman said, already working scenarios. Multiple fallback positions. If Darkseid commits to full invasion, we need. The watchtower shuddered, not from external impact, but from something worse, reality itself flexing. Around presence too massive for single dimension to contain comfortably. Every alarm simultaneously screamed warnings. Holographic displays showed impossible readings, space-time distortion signatures. Omega energy saturation, father box networks activating worldwide. Boom tube apertures opening not just near Earth, but throughout solar system. Cyborg's technological components blazed with emergency data. Multiple contacts. Parademon armies numbering in millions. Apocalypse warships achieving orbital positions around every inhabited planet. And his human eye widened with horror. Massive energy signature emerging from boom tube above Themyscira. It's, oh God, it's him. His actual avatar. Darkseid is manifesting. Superman's expression went cold with determination. Thor recognized. Warrior accepting inevitable battle despite preferring peace. Then we're out of time for clever plans. The war is here. No, Constantine said urgently, moving to central display. We stick to the plan. Thor demonstrates that Mjolnir cannot be corrupted. We make Darkseid understand his quest is futile. We win through truth rather than force. And if he attacks anyway? Diana asked. Constantine's expression lost all humor, showing the man who'd sacrificed friends and damned innocents to save worlds. The magician who lived with guilt. Because someone had to be willing to make impossible choices. Then we do what heroes always do when facing impossible odds and fighting for something that matters more than survival. Which is, Thor prompted. Constantine met his eyes, and for a moment the cynicism stripped away entirely, revealing something that might have been nobility, if buried under layers of self-protective sarcasm. We stand anyway. We fight knowing we'll probably lose. We maintain our principles even when pragmatism screams to compromise. Because that's what makes us different from Darkseid. That's what makes us worthy. The word hung in the air like prayer. Worthy, not because of power possessed or victories claimed, but because of choices made when everything suggested choosing differently. Standing when logic demanded kneeling. Maintaining principle when survival meant compromise. Thor stood, Mjolnir blazing with gathering storm. Around him, Earth's heroes rose as one, god and mortal, alien and human, powered and unpowered. United not by shared species or common origin, but by something Darkseid would never understand. The willingness to be worthy even when worthiness offered no guarantee of victory. Then let us greet this dark side, Thor declared, his voice carrying thunder's certainty. Let him see what happens when tyranny meets beings who refuse to calculate whether justice is worth defending. Let Apocalypse learn that some equations cannot be solved through force alone. Through the watchtower's viewports, Earth hung like jewel against void, beautiful, fragile, worth defending not because victory was certain, but because surrender was unthinkable. And somewhere between the stars, Darkseid's Omega eyes opened in anticipation. The Asgardian had proven more interesting than expected. Time to see if worthiness could withstand direct exposure to anti-life's mathematical proof. Time to see which philosophy would break first, hope or nihilism. Time to see if gods could remain worthy when facing the ultimate judge who believed worth itself was lie waiting to be exposed. The boom tube that opened above Themyscira was different from all others. Where previous portals had been wounds torn in reality, this was surgical incision performed by master who understood spacetime's anatomy intimately. The aperture expanded with geometric precision, and through it descended not an army, but a singular presence so overwhelming that reality itself seemed to compress under the weight of his existence. Darkseid. He stood 20 feet tall in this avatar form, body carved from living stone and cosmic malevolence. Gray skin stretched over muscles that defied biology, armor that was part technology and part extension of his being. But it was the eyes that made even gods hesitate, burning red with Omega energy, radiating the kind of certainty that came from having conquered 1,000 worlds and crushed 1,000,000 rebellions. He floated above Themyscira with arms crossed, studying the assembled defenders like entomologists examining particularly interesting insects. Thor stood at the front of the defense line, Mjolnir blazing with lightning that illuminated the darkening sky. Beside him, Wonder Woman held her sword with warrior's readiness. Superman floated to his right, cape billowing in winds that existed only around concentrations of massive power. Batman remained grounded but no less present, his contingency plans already running. The entire Justice League formed Spearpoint, backed by Themyscira's warriors and every hero who'd answered the call. Asgardian, Darkseid's voice resonated with harmonic that bypassed ears to implant meaning directly into consciousness. I am Darkseid. I am tyranny given form. I am the inevitable conclusion of all existence. That power alone determines truth. That free will is cosmic joke. That worthiness is lie beings tell themselves to justify meaningless struggles. His Omega eyes blazed brighter. You possess weapon that challenges this truth. I have come to correct such heresy. Thor stepped forward, every Asgardian instinct screaming. Warnings, but warriors' courage overriding. Survival calculation. I am Thor, son of Odin, prince of Asgard. I have heard thy claims, tyrant. I have measured thy philosophy against Hammer's judgment, and I find thy certainty wanting. Wanting. Darkseid's expression shifted. Infinitesimally, surprise, perhaps, that prey would dare verbal challenge. Explain your defiance before I demonstrate its futility. Thy anti-life equation seeks mathematical proof that existence is meaningless. Thor declared, his voice carrying across battlefield and beyond, speaking not just to Darkseid but to every being watching this confrontation. But Mjolnir proves the opposite. Its enchantments measure worthiness, quality that exists beyond simple mathematics, attribute that transcends equation. If worth is real and measurable, yet cannot be reduced to pure calculation, then life itself possesses meaning that resists thy nihilistic proof. Silence stretched across Themyscira. Every defender held breath, waiting for Darkseid's response. The Lord of Apocalypse studied Thor with renewed intensity, Omega energy flickering as calculations ran behind those burning eyes. Interesting thesis, Darkseid said finally. Flawed, but interesting. You claim worthiness transcends mathematics, yet your hammer uses enchantment, which is merely applied mystical mathematics, to measure this supposedly transcendent quality. The contradiction invalidates your argument. Does it? Constantine's voice cut across the battlefield as the magician stepped forward, cigarette appearing between his fingers despite cosmic confrontation. Because from where I'm standing, mate. You're the one trapped in contradiction. You seek equation to prove life is meaningless. But if you succeed, the equation itself becomes meaningless. You can't have mathematical proof that mathematics is insufficient without invalidating the proof itself. Darkseid's Omega eyes focused on Constantine, with the kind of attention that had reduced beings to component atoms. The magician who cons demons speaks of logic? Amusing. Your parlor tricks are irrelevant to cosmic truth. Are they? Constantine took drag, exhaled smoke directly toward Darkseid with suicidal bravado. Because I'm not the one who spent millennia chasing impossible proof. I'm not the one who's conquered thousands of worlds and still feels empty. Because conquest doesn't fill the void where meaning should be. I'm not the one so terrified that life might actually matter that I'd burn universe itself rather than admit I've been wrong. For first time, Darkseid's expression shifted into something approaching emotion, rage, cold and absolute. You dare psychoanalyze a god? I dare mock a tyrant pretending his trauma justifies tyranny. Constantine corrected, and his cynicism had transformed into something fiercer. You want anti-life equation because if you can prove everyone is worthless, you don't have to face that you're just another broken being using power to avoid healing. That's not philosophy, mate. That's therapy dodging on cosmic scale. Darkseid's Omega beams lanced out faster than thought. Twin rays of annihilation aimed directly at Constantine's chest. Superman moved with Kryptonian speed to intercept, but he wouldn't reach in time. The beams would vaporize the magician, reduce him to constituent particles before Mjolnir intercepted the Omega energy. Thor had moved without conscious decision, warrior instinct overriding tactical thinking. The hammer met the beams mid-flight, and the collision was apocalyptic. Omega energy, which could erase beings from existence, track targets through dimensions, ignore conventional defenses, met Odin's enchantments head-on. The beams tried to curve around the hammer, seeking Constantine with relentless purpose, but Mjolnir's worthiness judgment created barrier that even Darkseid's power couldn't bypass. The Omega beams dissipated against impossibility, power that literally could not harm the worthy. When judged by standards transcending power itself, Darkseid's eyes widened fractionally. Impossible. My Omega sanction cannot be deflected by mere enchantment. It's not mere enchantment, Thor said, understanding crystallizing with lightning-bright clarity. It's proof, living demonstration that worth exists independent of power, that meaning persists despite thy claims otherwise. Thy Omega energy can erase existence, but it cannot erase the truth that some beings deserve to exist more than others, not through power, but through character. Semantics, Darkseid growled, but his certainty had fractured microscopically. Your hammer protects you. Remove it, and Thor released Mjolnir. The hammer fell, clattering against Themyscira's stone with sound that echoed like judgment bell. Every defender gasped. Superman moved to protest. Diana's hand went to her sword. But Thor stood there, unarmed before God of tyranny, and his expression held absolute certainty. I am worthy without the hammer, Thor declared. The enchantment recognizes quality that exists within me. It does not create such quality. Power is merely tool. Worth is foundation. He met Darkseid's burning gaze without flinching. Thy entire philosophy collapses before this simple truth. I would rather die worthy than live having compromised what makes life meaningful. And no equation, no matter how elegant, can reduce that choice to mere calculation. Darkseid stared at the Asgardian, who disarmed himself in ultimate act of philosophical defiance. For a long moment, nothing moved. The armies of apocalypse surrounding the planet held position. Earth's defenders maintained formation. Reality itself seemed to pause, waiting for response that would determine whether war began or philosophy won. You believe this makes you strong, Darkseid said finally, his voice carrying something that might have been respect if filtered through infinite contempt. This willingness to die for abstract principle, you believe it proves your worthiness. It proves nothing, Thor replied. Worth isn't proven, it's chosen. Every moment, every decision, every action where I choose principle over convenience. That's what thy equation cannot capture. That's what makes anti-life impossible. Because life's meaning exists in choices we make, not in power we wield. Then you'll die for those choices, Darkseid said, and raised both hands. Omega energy built between his palms. Not twin beams, but sphere of annihilation. Large enough to erase Themyscira from existence. And when you're erased from reality, when your precious worthiness is reduced to quantum foam, the universe will continue exactly as before, proving that your meaning was illusion all along. Wait. Diana stepped forward, her voice carrying Amazon authority and desperate gambit. You seek proof that meaning exists or doesn't. You want definitive answer to cosmic question that's haunted you for millennia. She gestured at Mjolnir, lying on the ground. Test it. Truly test it. Try to lift Thor's hammer. If your philosophy is correct, if worthiness is indeed illusion and power alone matters, then your strength should override any enchantment. But if the hammer refuses you, she let the implication hang. Darkseid's Omega sphere dissipated slowly. Interest peaked despite himself. You offer test of worthiness? Knowing that if I succeed, it proves your entire philosophy wrong. I offer you truth, Diana corrected. Whatever that truth is, isn't that what you claim to seek? Absolute proof that ends all debate. Here it stands before you, hammer that judges based on criteria beyond power. Try to lift it, Darkseid. Prove that your might makes right. Or discover that some things in this universe respond to qualities you've spent eternity trying to disprove. Silence absolute. Superman looked at Diana with expression mixing horror and admiration. This was either brilliant strategy or catastrophic miscalculation. Batman's cowl tilted, running scenarios at processor speed. Constantine muttered something. That sounded like prayer, despite being addressed to no particular deity. Darkseid descended slowly until he stood on Themyscira's stones. The ground cracked under his weight, reality adjusting to accommodate presence that shouldn't fit in single dimension. He approached Mjolnir where it lay, studying the hammer with Omega vision that saw through matter into enchantments. Fundamental structure. I am Darkseid, he said, each word carrying weight of cosmic certainty. I am conqueror of thousand worlds. I am inevitable triumph of power over weakness. I am proof that meaning is luxury only fools can afford. He grasped Mjolnir's handle with hand that had crushed stars. And I will demonstrate that worthiness is lie told by beings too weak to embrace truth. He pulled. The hammer didn't move, not even slightly. Might as well have been trying to lift concept of gravity itself. Darkseid's expression shifted, surprise, bleeding into confusion into something that might have been doubt if gods of tyranny experienced such emotion. He pulled harder, Omega energy flooding through his arm, strength that could crack planets applied to simple hammer lying on ground. Mjolnir remained motionless. Darkseid released the handle, stepped back, and for first time in eons, the Lord of Apocalypse looked uncertain. The enchantment resists. But this proves nothing. Magic can be overcome through sufficient. It's not magic alone, Thor said quietly, retrieving his hammer with casual ease that made the contrast devastating. It's judgment, assessment that transcends power. Thy strength is absolute, Darkseid. Thy will is iron. Thy determination is cosmic force. But worthiness. He held Mjolnir high, lightning crackling in response to presence that deserved its power. Worthiness requires qualities thou hast spent eternity rejecting. Humility, compassion, willingness to bear power's burden for sake of beings weaker than thyself. The very things thy anti-life equation seeks to disprove are the things that make one worthy of this hammer. Then the enchantment is flawed, Darkseid declared. But his certainty had fractured audibly. Your father's magic is merely exclusionary, designed to keep power from those who would use it properly. Give it to those who hesitate and doubt, and who choose, Constantine interrupted, stepping beside Thor with renewed confidence. That's what terrifies you, isn't it? Not that worthiness is exclusionary, but that it's choice. You've built entire existence on premise that beings are either strong or weak, worthy or worthless, by nature rather than decision. But if worthiness is something chosen through countless small actions rather than inherent quality, the magician's smile was sharp as revelation. Then anti-life equation becomes not just impossible but irrelevant. Because even if you proved all beings are fundamentally worthless, they could still choose to become worthy through action. Your cosmic truth becomes invalidated by simple decision to be better. Darkseid stood there, surrounded by armies and power sufficient to crack Earth's crust. And for first time in his existence, he had no response. The hammer had judged. The enchantment had spoken. And the verdict was clear. Power alone was insufficient. Conquest meant nothing. Tyranny proved nothing. Worth existed, measurable but transcendent. Real but beyond reduction to pure equation. The anti-life equation wasn't just impossible to find. It was fundamentally incoherent concept. A paradox masquerading as philosophy. This changes nothing, Darkseid said finally, but the words rang hollow. You have proven only that one weapon judges by arbitrary mystical standards. The universe remains as it was. Power still determines outcomes. The strong still triumph over weak. Perhaps, Superman said, floating forward to stand beside Thor. But now you know that triumph isn't worth. That conquest doesn't create meaning. That all your power, all your victories, all your absolute certainty. He met Darkseid's gaze without fear. Doesn't make you worthy of this hammer. Doesn't prove your philosophy true. Doesn't fill the void you're trying to deny exists. For a long moment, Darkseid stood in tableau of cosmic confrontation. Then, slowly, he turned away from Mjolnir, from Thor, from assembled defenders, who'd offered him truth. He'd spent millennia avoiding. This is not finished, he declared, and his voice carried promise rather than threat. I will find anti-life equation. I will prove existence is meaningless. And when I do, I will return to demonstrate that your precious worthiness was illusion all along. Then we'll be waiting, Diana replied, ready to remind you again that some truths persist despite all attempts to deny them. Darkseid's Omega eyes blazed one final time. Then he rose toward his boom tube. Around the planet, Apocalypse forces began retreating, their master's humiliation requiring tactical withdrawal to reassess. The invasion ended not with battle but with philosophy, cosmic tyrant, forced to confront that his lifelong quest might be fundamentally flawed. As the final boom tube closed, silence fell across Themyscira. Heroes slowly lowered weapons, tension bleeding into exhausted relief. They'd won, not through superior force or tactical brilliance, but through simple demonstration of truth Darkseid couldn't counter. Worth existed, meaning persisted, and no amount of power could erase choices that defined character. Thor looked at Mjolnir, at the hammer that had judged Tyrant and found him wanting, and understood why the Norns had brought him to this universe. Not to fight, not to conquer, but to stand as living reminder that some equations couldn't be solved through force alone. That worthiness mattered more than power. That hope persisted in the darkest night. 3 weeks after Darkseid's retreat, Thor stood on the watchtower's observation deck watching Earth rotate below with something approaching peace. The blue-green planet reminded him of Midgard from the Rainbow Bridge, familiar yet foreign. Home that wasn't his, but felt more welcoming with each passing day. Behind him, the mother box from the Hall of Justice pulsed softly, its consciousness integrated into the station's systems, helping cyborgs search for dimensional pathways that might lead an Asgardian prince home. Any progress? Diana asked, emerging from the corridor in civilian clothes, jeans and leather jacket that somehow made her no less formidable than full armor. Some, Thor admitted, though his tone carried ambivalence that surprised even himself. The mother box has identified 3 potential Bifrost energy signatures within reachable distance. With proper calibration and perhaps assistance from thy magic users, I could attempt transit within the week. But, Diana prompted, reading hesitation in his posture. But I find myself uncertain. Thor turned from the viewport to face her. In Asgard, I am prince and protector, yes, but also symbol of old ways. Reminder of warrior culture that perhaps needs evolution. Here, he gestured vaguely at Earth below. Here I am simply Thor, warriors standing beside other warriors. And there is freedom in such simplicity. Diana leaned against the observation window, her expression knowing. You've tasted what it means to be hero rather than royalty. To fight because the cause is just rather than because duty demands. Is there difference? Thor asked. Always, Diana said quietly. Duty is burden we accept. Choice is freedom we claim. Both can lead to same actions, but the internal experience. She smiled slightly. When I left Themyscira for man's world, I told myself it was duty, that Amazons were meant to teach humanity, that I was fulfilling our purpose. But truth? Her smile widened. I wanted to see what I could become without 3,000 years of expectation weighing on every decision. I wanted to choose my battles rather than inherit them. And did you find such freedom? Thor asked. Sometimes, Diana admitted. Other times I discovered that choosing your battles means accepting responsibility for outcomes in ways inherited duty never requires. There's no, I was merely following orders when you're the one giving yourself orders. She studied him with warrior's assessment. You'll go home eventually. You have people who need you, a realm that depends on you. But while you're here, you get to discover who Thor is when Asgard's expectations aren't defining him. The mother box pinged softly, not alarm, but notification. Cyborg's voice emerged from the station speakers. Thor, Diana, you'll want to see this. Conference room. Now, they found the assembled Justice League already gathered around the holographic display. Superman's expression was carefully neutral in that way that meant he was processing something significant. Batman's cowl reflected cascading data. Flash vibrated with barely contained energy that seemed more excitement than anxiety. Constantine lounged in corner with fresh cigarette despite Cyborg's repeated requests about fire safety protocols. Show him, Batman said without preamble. The holographic display shifted, showing news feeds from around the globe. But these weren't crisis reports or disaster coverage. They were testimonials. Videos of people, hundreds, thousands, millions, discussing the confrontation on Themyscira, talking about what it meant that Darkseid himself had failed the worthiness test, debating whether power alone determined value or if character mattered more. It's gone viral, Flash explained, his words tumbling out at barely subsonic speed. Not just on Earth, but across the galaxy. The Green Lantern Corps is discussing it. Thanagar's military academies are using it as philosophical exercise. Even the Guardians of OA apparently held an emergency session about whether their worthiness assessments for ring bearers need updating. You've started a philosophical movement, Superman said, and his expression held something approaching awe. People are questioning whether power should determine leadership, whether strength makes right, whether conquering is the same as earning respect. He gestured at the cascading feeds. Half the authoritarian regimes in the galaxy are scrambling to contain the idea that their citizens might judge them unworthy, regardless of military might. Thor stared at the display, watching beings across countless worlds debating worthiness versus power, meaning versus nihilism, choice versus determinism. His simple refusal to let Darkseid corrupt Mjolnir's enchantments had apparently become cosmic. Referendum on the nature of value itself. I merely stood for what I believe, he said quietly. I did not intend to spark revolution. The best ones never are, Constantine drawled, exhaling smoke toward ventilation that couldn't possibly keep up. You didn't give speeches or organize movements. You just demonstrated through action that some things matter more than survival, that principles can outweigh pragmatism when principles are actually worth maintaining. He stubbed out his cigarette with unusual gentleness. That's more dangerous to tyrants than any army, mate. Because armies they can fight, ideas they can't. There's more, Batman said, bringing up new data. Apocalypse has gone quiet. No boom tube signatures for 3 weeks. No Parademon raids. No female furies terrorizing border worlds. Darkseid has completely withdrawn from observable activities. Is he planning larger assault? Diana asked, warrior instincts immediately tactical. Unknown, Batman admitted, which for him was practically confession of complete ignorance. But the mother box we've been working with has theory. He nodded at Cyborg. The technological hero's components blazed as he interfaced directly with the sentient computer. The mother box believes Darkseid is processing. For the first time in millennia, he encountered proof that his fundamental philosophy might be wrong. Not defeated, wrong. That's different. He can recover from defeats. He's done it countless times. But having his core worldview challenged. Cyborgs. Human, I showed genuine uncertainty. The mother box thinks he's either having existential crisis or planning revenge so elaborate we can't begin to anticipate it. Or both, Constantine suggested. Gods don't handle cognitive dissonance well, tend to either grow from it or double down on the thing that's killing them. 50-50 odds on which way Darkseid breaks. Thor felt responsibility settle across his shoulders with familiar weight. If my presence has endangered thy universe further. You've given it hope, Superman interrupted, his voice carrying conviction that had inspired billions. Real hope, not naive optimism. You demonstrated that power without worthiness is hollow. That meaning exists despite attempts to deny it. That choices matter. He floated closer, meeting Thor's eyes directly. Whatever Darkseid does next, he'll do knowing that the universe saw him fail the worthiness test. That's wound no Omega sanction can heal. Besides, Flash added with irrepressible grin, if he comes back for round 2, we'll be ready. We've got Asgardian thunder, Amazon fury, Kryptonian hope, human determination, and Constantine's willingness to cheat at cosmic scales. That's got to count for something. It counts for everything, Diana said, her warrior's certainty absolute. Thor, you asked earlier if there's difference between duty and choice. Let me answer differently. You chose to maintain your worthiness even when it would have been easier to compromise. You chose to disarm yourself before Darkseid rather than hide behind power. You chose principle over survival. She smiled with genuine warmth. Those choices rippled across reality itself. That's not duty fulfilled. That's heroism exemplified. The mother box pinged again, this time with data that made Cyborg's technological eye widen. The dimensional pathway is ready. I've integrated the Bifrost signatures with boom tube technology, safely, without corruption, to create stable transit corridor. If you want to go home, Thor. He met the Asgardian's eyes. We can send you within the hour. Silence fell across the conference room. Every hero present understood what the offer meant. Chance for Thor to return to his universe, his family, his people, to resume life interrupted by dimensional accident, to stop being refugee and become prince again. Thor looked around at assembled heroes who'd become allies, comrades, something approaching friends in the brief time he'd known them. Superman with his impossible optimism backed by godlike power. Diana with her warrior's grace and princess's wisdom. Batman with his human determination and tactical brilliance. Flash's enthusiasm. Constantine's cynicism masking nobility. Cyborg's technological integration serving human heart. All of them united not by power, but by choice to be worthy of power they wielded. I should return, Thor said slowly, each word carrying weight of decision. Asgard needs its prince. The 9 realms require protection. My father, he paused, thinking of Odin and all the complicated legacy that relationship carried. My father will have questions about my absence. But, Superman prompted gently. Thor smiled, genuine expression that transformed his face from warrior's determination into something warmer. But I find myself grateful for accident that brought me here, for chance to stand beside heroes who choose worthiness daily rather than inheriting it, for opportunity to learn that being God means nothing if actions do not justify the title. He raised Mjolnir, lightning crackling in response to his emotion. When I return to Asgard, I will carry these lessons with me. Will remember what it means to be judged worthy rather than simply assumed so by birthright. You'll always have place here, Diana said, and her formality dropped into genuine warmth. If you ever find yourself in this universe, again, whether by accident or intention, the Justice League stands with Thor of Asgard, as Asgard stands with Justice League, Thor replied, making formal oath that carried divine weight. Should thy universe ever face threat beyond thy capacity to contain, should Darkseid return with forces that outnumber stars, should darkness threaten to overwhelm light itself, he met each hero's eyes in turn. Call for Thor Odinson. I will find way across realities to answer. This I swear upon Mjolnir and all that worthiness represents. Thunder rolled through the watchtower. Despite being in vacuum of space, oath acknowledged, by forces beyond physics. Binding promise sealed across dimensional boundaries. Batman's cowl tilted in satisfaction. He was already calculating how to exploit multiversal backup plan. Superman smiled with warmth that had inspired hope across galaxies. Diana inclined her head in warrior's salute. Right then, Constantine said, breaking the moment with characteristic irreverence. Before this gets any more touching, someone should probably mention that Dimensional transit is monumentally painful, and you'll arrive in your universe probably naked and definitely confused about why everything tastes purple for 3 days. Thor laughed, full, genuine sound that had been heard too rarely during his time in this universe. I have survived far worse for far less worthy reasons, wizard. I think I can endure purple-flavored confusion in service of returning home. Then we'd better get started, Cyborg said, already interfacing with the mother box to finalize transit protocols. The dimensional window is narrow. If we're going to do this, it needs to be now. They moved to the watchtower's transport bay, where Cyborg and the mother box had constructed something that looked like boom tube technology married to Bifrost aesthetics, geometric portal framed by rainbow energy that somehow captured essence of both systems without corrupting either. Thor stood before it, Mjolnir heavy in his hand, cape settling around his shoulders. One last question, Batman said, his tactical mind apparently unable to resist final data point. When Darkseid tried to lift your hammer, was there any chance he could have succeeded? If his philosophy had been correct, if worthiness truly was illusion? Thor considered the question with Asgardian honesty. I do not know. The enchantment is my father's creation, not mine. It judges by standards Odin set millennia ago. But he looked at Mjolnir, at the hammer that had defended him, judged for him, stood as proof that some truths transcended power. I believe the enchantment recognizes what it measures. Worth is real because beings choose to make it real through countless small decisions. Darkseid could not lift the hammer not because he lacked power, but because he has spent eternity choosing tyranny over service, conquest over protection, domination over worthy leadership. Thor met Batman's eyes through the cowl. In another existence, with different choices, perhaps even Darkseid could become worthy. But the being he has chosen to become cannot lift this hammer. That is not magic's failure, it is philosophy's verdict. Batman nodded slowly, and Thor suspected that answer would fuel the Dark Knight's contingency, planning for years. Go home, Thor, Superman said, extending his hand for final clasp. Your people need you. Your universe needs you. But know that you've changed this universe too. Made it remember that worthiness matters, that choices define us. That power without principle is merely tyranny waiting to happen. Thor clasped Superman's hand, feeling Kryptonian strength equal his own, recognizing kinship between gods who chose to serve rather than rule. Thank you, my friend, for standing beside me, for teaching me, for reminding me why the hammer's judgment matters. He released the clasp and stepped toward the portal. And when next we meet, whether in thy universe or mine, let it be as brothers in arms, rather than strangers, divided by dimensional accident. Count on it, Flash said with grin that suggested he was already calculating how to breach dimensional barriers through pure speed if needed. Thor took final breath of this universe's air, squared his shoulders, and stepped into the portal. Rainbow energy and geometric precision wrapped around him, pulling him between realities. With the mother boxes, consciousness guiding passage while Bifrost energy recognized Asgardian essence and welcomed him home. The watchtower fell away, replaced by kaleidoscope of impossible colors and dimensions that would have driven mortals mad. But Thor was God, worthy of Mjolnir, Prince of Asgard. He endured the passage with grim determination, holding tight to lessons learned and friendships forged, carrying memory of universe where heroes chose worthiness daily rather than claiming it by birthright. Behind him, in the watchtower, assembled heroes watched the portal close. Earth remained. Darkseid lurked in shadows, perhaps planning revenge, perhaps wrestling with existential crisis. The universe continued turning, slightly changed by Asgardian prince who'd stumbled through dimensional barrier and reminded everyone that power without worth was tyranny's hollow promise. Think he'll be okay? Flash asked into the silence. He's Thor, Diana said with absolute certainty. He'll be fine. More than fine, he'll be worthy. And somewhere across dimensional barriers, in universe of golden halls and rainbow bridges, Thor Odinson materialized in Asgard's throne room with rainbow energy dissipating around him, naked as Constantine had predicted and discovered, that worthiness translated across all realities. His father looked up from the throne, surprise and relief warring across ancient features. My son, where have you been? Thor smiled, expression carrying weight of experience and growth, and raised Mjolnir. Learning, father. Learning what it truly means to be worthy of this hammer. What it truly means to be God among men, rather than simply assuming such. Title by birth. Odin's single I studied his son with intensity that had judged kingdoms. And slowly, the All-Father smiled. Then your journey, wherever it took you, served its purpose. Welcome home, Thor. We have much to discuss. Yes, Thor agreed, thinking of the Justice League. Of heroes who chose worthiness daily. Of universe where even Superman could become tyrant if he forgot what made power worth wielding. We do indeed. Thor's time in the DC universe became legend. Story told across dimensions about the Asgardian prince who stood against Darkseid and won not through superior force but through simple demonstration of philosophical truth. The hammer's judgment rippled across realities, inspiring beings to question whether power alone determined value or if worthiness required something deeper. In Asgard, Thor's approach to leadership evolved. He still wielded Mjolnir with warrior's skill, still defended the Nine Realms with divine fury. But now he questioned, challenged, demonstrated that godhood was responsibility rather than privilege. Odin watched his son's transformation with mixture of pride and concern. Some lessons changed beings so fundamentally they could never return to comfortable certainty. In the DC universe, the Justice League continued their eternal vigil against darkness. But they did so with renewed understanding that power required constant worthiness testing, that heroism was choice renewed daily rather than status claimed once. Superman looked at his own symbol differently, wondering if he remained worthy of hope he inspired. Batman's contingency plans now included assessment criteria beyond pure capability. Wonder Woman trained harder, knowing that warrior's skill meant nothing without warrior's code. And Darkseid, the Lord of Apocalypse, remained in his fortress, Omega eyes staring at screens showing the hammer that had judged him unworthy. His quest for the anti-life equation continued, but now haunted by question he'd never allowed himself to consider. What if worthiness was real? What if his millennia of conquest had been not inevitable triumph, but choice leading away from something more valuable than victory? What if power alone was insufficient? The question burned in his consciousness, like poison or revelation. He could not yet determine which. But one truth remained absolute. The Asgardian had planted seed of doubt in soil where only certainty had grown for eons. And seeds, given time, became trees that broke foundations of even strongest fortresses. Across the multiverse, the story spread. The god of thunder who chose worthiness over survival. The hammer that judged tyrants and found them wanting. The proof that meaning existed despite all attempts to deny it. And wherever beings struggled under tyranny's weight, wherever heroes questioned whether sacrifice served any purpose, wherever hope fought against encroaching darkness, they remembered. Thor of Asgard stood before Darkseid and did not kneel. He demonstrated that power without worth was merely force waiting to fail. He proved that choices defined character more than strength defined capability. He remained worthy even when worthiness offered no guarantee of victory. And in a universe where Superman once became tyrant, where Batman's paranoia sometimes proved justified, where even gods could forget what made godhood meaningful rather than merely powerful, that lesson mattered more than any battle won or enemy defeated. The hammer had judged, the worthy remained, and hope shined brightest in the darkest night, not because darkness was weak, but because beings chose to kindle light despite knowing night would fall again. That was worthiness. That was heroism. That was the lesson Thor carried between universes and would carry until Ragnarok itself demanded final accounting. Some truths transcended dimensions. Some choices echoed across realities. Some beings, regardless of origin or universe, simply chose to be worthy of the power they wielded. Thor Odinson was such a being. The Justice League stood as such beings. And the multiverse was better for their existence. Not because they were strongest or most powerful, but because they chose, daily and eternally, to remain worthy of the trust placed in them.